Chapter 1126. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say, net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Princess Yuyen and Chu Qing hid behind a tree not far away and quietly watched Princess Yu Tao enter Chu Liuchen's courtyard. They couldn't help but show a proud smile on their faces. My good elder sister even wants to go back and fight with my elder brother for the throne. At this time, she is entangled with Prince Chen. Even if Prince Chen has married, so what? My elder sister can still be his concubine. She had sent someone to invite the other 2 accompanying ministers of the Su country. As long as they saw Princess Yu Tao enter Prince Chen's yard and not come out for a long time, it would be considered a success. As a princess of a kingdom, Princess Yu Tao was the one who asked her to be married off as a concubine. Who asked her to be with a man at a time like this. However, in the next moment, Princess Yu Yan's expression changed drastically. She suddenly grabbed Chu Qing's hand, and her surprised action also increased. Princess Yu Tao was thrown out. Yes, she was thrown out. In front of everyone, Princess Yu Tao was thrown 2 or 3 times before she managed to stabilize herself. Even so, she still had to take a few steps back to steady herself. Princess Yu Tao's skills weren't bad. If it was any other girl, they would have lost a layer of skin even if they didn't die. What does Prince Chen mean? With a livid face, Princess Yu Tao looked at Chu Liuchen, who walked out of the yard step by step with a few guards. She stepped back and looked alert. What does Princess Yu Tao mean? You came here in a hurry at this time. Do you have anything to say? Chu Liuchen stopped and asked with a gentle face. If not for the fact that Princess Yu Tao had been thrown out, she would have thought that Prince Chen was a gentle and elegant man. I do have something to say. After saying that, Princess Yu Tao angrily walked inside. Chu Liuchen blocked her with the folding fan in his hand. Princess Yu Tao, please speak your mind. Princess Yu Tao asked in astonishment. She looked to her left and right. Talking about something outside the courtyard? Everything can be said to others. Is it possible that Princess Yu Tao doesn't dare to say it in front of others? Chu Liuchen asked lazily. Good. Princess Yu Tao was furious, but perhaps it was because of the pain from the fall, she didn't dare to take another step back. I'm here to ask you why you lied to us. You clearly returned to the capital first, but you hid it from us. What's the reason? Are you looking down on our Su nation? If that's the case, I'll take my second sister back and stop her from marrying Commandery Prince Qing. Princess Yu Tao said threateningly, raising her head high. Princess Yu Yan, who was behind the tree, suddenly had a bad feeling. She looked at Chu Qing and rushed out at the same time. Big sister? Even before Duchess Yu Yan arrived, her voice had already arrived. At the same time, Chu Liuchen said leisurely, Princess Yu Yan and Commandery Prince Qing are already like this. Can Princess Yuan marry Prince Chen? I have something important to report. Seeing that the situation was not good, Chu Qing hurriedly shouted and interrupted Chu Liuchen. How could he let Chu Liuchen reveal the matter between him and Princess Yuan in front of so many people? There were still some things about their marriage that had not been properly discussed. Whether it was Princess Yuan or Chu Qing, they both had other ideas. Everyone wanted to cover up what had happened in the Su nation. Especially now that they had arrived at the capital. This was an even more crucial moment for the city. Second sister, why are you here? Didn't you say that you were not feeling well and asked me to come alone to ask Prince Chen for an explanation? Princess Yu Tao turned to Princess Yuyen behind her in surprise and asked in confusion. Princess Yuyen was so angry that she secretly gritted her teeth. She had finally tricked Princess Yu Tao, but now she had to come to the rescue herself. She felt so aggrieved that she almost vomited blood. Big sister, I thought something was wrong, so I hurriedly came to find you. We are about to enter the capital of Dongtsang Kingdom, and we can't let any gossip spread at this time. If you have to stay in Dongtsang Kingdom because of this gossip, it will be my fault. Princess Yuan wiped the unnecessary sweat on her face and said with a flattering smile. Not far away, the other 2 messengers of the Su nation also appeared at the end of the road. They looked at Princess Yu Tao and Princess Yu Yan and didn't understand what they meant at the moment. They carefully kept silent and observed the situation. The second princess said that the first princess and Prince Chen had an affair. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, and now they were alone together. If Princess Yutao wanted to inherit the Su nation, she must marry a man of the Su nation in the future. She couldn't have anything to do with the prince of Dongtsang Kingdom. Otherwise, the Su nation might be destroyed. The two of them did not have high official positions. They were neither on the side of the first princess nor the side of the first prince. They were the real power figures in the most neutral side. At present, both the first princess and the first prince wanted to draw them to their side. This time, they were asked to send Princess Yuyen to the marriage and assist Princess Yutao. Everything they saw would be sent to the emperor of the Su nation. They were the most loyal subordinates of the emperor, and the emperor would listen to their advice the most. It turns out that Princess Yuyen asked the first princess to come here to ask this question. Princess Yuyen and Commandery Prince Qing hid aside and eavesdropped? Chu Luchen was not so easy to talk to. Everything can be said by others. What I and Princess Yutao said can be said and asked together. Princess Yuyen's face turned red, but she still insisted. Prince Chen, you are wrong. I just happened to meet Commandery Prince Qing. Commandery Prince Qing, what a coincidence. Are you outside my yard? Chu Luchen raised the corner of his mouth, and there was a hint of horror in his sarcastic smile. Chu Qing pulled himself together and said respectfully, Prince Chen, I just received the news that Prince Yu will come to pick up the messengers tomorrow. I come to discuss with Prince Chen about the matter of picking up the messengers tomorrow. This was to show that he really had something to do. Chu Luchen glanced at Chu Qing with an ambiguous meaning, and his smile became more and more treacherous. Then he flicked his sleeves gently and said, You can discuss this kind of thing with General Qin. I don't care about this kind of thing. After saying that, he ignored the people outside the yard and turned back. The guards followed him closely. When he walked to the front of the yard, he stood in front of the gate of the yard majestically and looked at them fiercely and vigilantly. Second sister, are you sure you're here to help me, and not to bring him, your future husband, to harm me? Princess Yutao sneered at Princess Yuyen, her eyes cold. She didn't believe it at first, but after seeing Princess Yuyen and Chu Qing appear, and two messengers with real power from the Su nation, she understood everything. It was obvious that they wanted her to die in the Dongtsang nation and not let her go back to the Su nation to fight for the throne. Yuyen had a good plan. What are you talking about, big sister? Princess Yuyen argued. She was relieved that Chu Luchen had left. She had always been good at dealing with Princess Yutao. Anyway, she didn't have any evidence, so she didn't believe that Princess Yutao could really do anything to her. For so many years, she had been fighting with Princess Yutao. With the help of her mother, she had never been in a disadvantageous position. Slap. A heavy slap made Princess Yuyen take 2 steps back. If Chu Qing hadn't pulled her, she would have fallen to the ground in embarrassment. Yutao, you? How dare you hit me? Princess Yuyen covered her face with her hands and looked at Princess Yutao in disbelief. Even though Princess Yutao was strong in martial arts, she wouldn't hit her so rudely. Princess Yuyen still had her brother and mother behind her. Princess Yuyen, please understand your identity. You are the princess of the Su nation, a princess who came here to make peace. Even if you marry into the Dongtsang nation, you still represent the face of the Su nation. Without the Su nation, you are nothing. Where should you side your heart? I hope you can see clearly that you will always be Princess Yuyen of the Su nation. Don't do anything that will make the Su nation lose face. Princess Yutao said fiercely. After scolding her, she turned around and strode away without looking at Princess Yutao, whose eyes were already full of tears. This was not the Su nation. There was no son born by the devil concubine, and there was no father who protected Yin. The two messengers of the Su nation looked at each other and nodded secretly. As the future successor of the Su nation, she should indeed prioritize the interests of the Su nation. Princess Yuyen was really too insensible. Seeing that she was so close to Commandery Prince Qing, could it be that she was really working for the interests of the Dongtsang nation? In this case, the descendants of the first prince were not suitable. They would go back and write a secret decree to report to the emperor. Seeing that Princess Yutao had left, the two messengers also turned around and left. They did not care about the pitiful Princess Yuyen who wanted to say something. Wasn't there Princess Yuyen's future husband? What did they need them to do at this time? For this future husband, Princess Yuyen had even schemed against her own elder sister. The two messengers were very dissatisfied. "But I will kill you." Princess Yuyen looked at Princess Yutao's figure with hatred. However, she knew that she could not defeat Princess Yutao at this time. She was filled with hatred and annoyance. At this time, she also understood that this was not the Su nation. Her reliance was useless here. She turned to look at Chu Qing and gnashed her teeth in hatred. After cursing, she stamped her feet with hatred, pushed Chu Qing away, and strode away. Since she was going to marry into the Dongtsang nation, she did not want to marry Chu Qing, a trash. In front of so many people, she was beaten by Princess Yutao, but this trash did not say anything. In vain, her mother said that it was not bad for her to marry Chu Qing. At least their bloodlines were similar. They were pure royal bloodlines of the previous dynasty. What royal bloodlines of the previous dynasty? She was the bloodline of the honorable son-in-law, not the bloodline of the previous dynasty that had been destroyed long ago. She did not want to marry Chu Qing. She wanted to choose someone else to marry. Chu Luchen could not marry her, but there were others, right? She had already found out that those people had not married yet. She still had a chance, right? Chu Qing looked at Princess Yutao's back coldly. He did not want to marry this woman either, but he had a reason to marry her. In fact, at the beginning he only conspired with her to scheme against Princess Yutao and Chu Luchen. He did not expect that he would be the one who was schemed against. He had his own princess, and he also had a reason to marry her. Chapter 1127. Xiao Wanru had long known that Princess Haqin of the Su state was going to the capital city. Hearing that it was very lively outside, Xiao Wanru had told Chu Luchen early that she would also go to see the fun. During this period of time, she had been staying in the mansion every day. She was also very bored. It was very peaceful in the mansion. What she had imagined did not happen. Having one more person in the mansion made her feel relieved. Although there were still people keeping an eye on her, they were not as strict as before. It seemed that Miss Qin Yin really did not want to become a concubine in Prince Chen's mansion. However, it had only been a few days, and they didn't have much contact with each other. Xiao Wanru really couldn't see through Miss Qin Yin's character. Anyway, Xiao Wanru was not in a hurry to let her live here peacefully. The wound on his arm was almost completely healed. He didn't move much, so he almost couldn't feel it. Xiao Wanru got up early in the morning and went out with Qing and Yu Jie, the two maids. Instead of taking a large carriage, she just found an ordinary carriage. From the outside, only the sign of Prince Chen's mansion could be seen, and the rest was exactly the same as an ordinary carriage. Of course, a lot of thought had been put into the decorations inside. The carriage was covered with a soft carpet. Even if the road was a little bumpy, the people in the carriage would not feel uncomfortable. The master and the two servants boarded the carriage and headed for the city gate. It was said that there would be a welcoming ceremony at the city gate today. The private room was booked by Chu Luchen for her. It was just outside the city gate. It was a private room in a restaurant near the city gate. The location of this private room was very good. When Xiao Wanru came over, there were already a lot of people at the city gate. They were all misses and childs from aristocratic families who were rarely seen in the past. Everyone wanted to see the two princesses of the Su country. It was said that the two princesses were the most famous beauties in the Su country. They wondered whether they were better or worse than the beauties on their side. "Princess, is that Miss Zhang and Miss Luo over there?" Yu Jie was a sharp-eyed girl. She pointed at one of the carriages in the crowd. In the carriage in front, someone lifted the curtains to take a look. Before they reached the place, the road was blocked. Everyone moved very slowly, moving bit by bit. Many of the young ladies sitting on the seats were already secretly looking out. Some of the calmer ones let down their gauze curtains to take a look, while some of the more lively ones directly lifted the curtains. Today was such a lively day, so no one cared about these small impolite details. Xiao Wanru looked through the gauze curtain and nodded with a deeper look in her eyes. "Don't Miss Zhang and Miss Luo like to play with Princess the most?" Why don't you ask the princess to come over with such an interesting thing? Yu Jie asked subconsciously. After asking, she suddenly thought of something and hurriedly stopped talking. She stole a glance at her master and saw that Xiao Wanru's face was as calm as water, so she breathed a sigh of relief. She almost forgot what had happened in the Imperial Palace that day. At that time, it was obviously these two misses who were eavesdropping. In fact, Yu Jie didn't understand why these two ladies, who had such a good relationship with her master, would eavesdrop. Even if they eavesdropped, they didn't say anything serious. Why didn't they show up later? He inexplicably estranged himself from his princess. The carriage slowly moved forward and finally arrived at the restaurant where the private room was reserved. This restaurant was very lively today. Not only were the private rooms upstairs booked, but even the seats downstairs were full. Everyone was sitting there. The most discussed topic was the matter of the Su Kingdom, especially the two princesses, Princess Yu Tao and Princess Yu Yen. It was said that Princess Yu Yen was here to marry Xiao Wanru, and Princess Yu Tao was here to send her sister off. These two princesses were very famous in the Mei Kingdom. It was said that they were extremely beautiful. Now that everyone was here, it could be regarded as a good opportunity to see them. Xiao Wanru, wearing a curtain hat, entered the restaurant with two maids. As soon as she entered the door, a sharp-eyed waiter came to greet her. When he heard that she was in the private room upstairs, he became more attentive and led her upstairs step by step. The innermost private room was the big one. After the waiter led them in, Yu Jie ordered a few dishes and some light fruit wine from the waiter, and then asked the waiter to leave. Qing helped Xiao Wanru take off the curtain hat and open the window for her. Looking out from this position, she had a particularly wide and clear view. It was still early, so the people of the Mei Kingdom had not come yet. Chu Luiwei had not sent anyone to pick them up. More carriages came over, and most of them got off at the nearby shops. Some entered the shops on the side and sat down to wait, while others just wandered around casually and waited. There were not so many seats for people to sit down, so they waited slowly. There was also a restaurant opposite this restaurant. Coincidentally, when they opened the window here, the window on the other side was also opened. Yu Jie ordered some dishes and came over to have a look. She recognized that the person in the private room across the street was Infanta Yuanlun. Yu Jie had seen the maids around Infanta Yuanlun before, so she could see them clearly at this time. Your Highness, the person opposite is Infanta Yuanlun. Xiao Wanru sat in the chair and nodded indifferently. It was expected that Infanta Yuan and Zhang Qilan would come to watch the fun. Your Highness, do you want to lower the curtain? Qing turned around and asked. No need. Xiao Wanru shook her head. Just like Infanta Yuan and Zhang Qilan could come to join in the fun, she also had a reason to come. Today was the day when Chu Luqin officially returned to the capital city, so she, as Princess Chen, should naturally come. Infanta Yuan, who seemed to have noticed Yu Jie at the opposite window, appeared at the window. She looked at Yu Jie with a very gentle expression, even with a trace of intention. Xiao Wanru also walked to the window. After bowing to each other, they looked at each other with a smile and then retreated. The dishes in the restaurant were good, and the fruit wine was very light. Xiao Wanru didn't drink in the past. It was Chu Luqin who recommended it to her, so she specially ordered some to taste and nodded after tasting it. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Yu Jie was stunned for a moment. The waiter had just told her not to come over without any reason. The dishes had been served. Who was knocking at the door at this time? Go and have a look. Xiao Wanru put down the chopsticks in her hand, gently wiped the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and said. Yu Jie obeyed and walked to the door. She opened the door and looked at the woman outside with a frown. May I ask if Princess Chen is here? The woman looked at Yu Jie and asked after bowing politely. No. Yu Jie closed the door impolitely and was about to close it. The woman pushed the door hard, suddenly knelt at the door and said, Please let me see Princess Chen. I have something to tell Princess Chen. Let her come in. Yu Jie was about to drive her away. Hearing Xiao Wanru's voice behind her, she could only open the door and said coldly, Come in. She didn't like this woman at all. What did the mistress of Marquis Xing have to do with her princess? Why did she come to her princess again and again? The woman called Yang stood up and entered the private room. Yu Jie closed the door behind her. Seeing Xiao Wanru, Yang was very excited. After moving her lips twice, she suddenly knelt down and said, "Greetings, fifth miss." After saying that, she burst into tears. She lowered her head and kowtowed to Xiao Wanru 3 times. Then she raised her head with tears all over her face. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Yang. Since she could find this place, it meant that she had been watching her. She should have guessed that she would come here today, so she deliberately waited in this area. There was the mark of Prince Chen's mansion on the carriage. If she looked carefully, she could indeed be watched. However, it was not an easy thing to see so many people coming and going in the carriages. No matter what you want, you don't have to come to me. I have nothing to do with the things of Marquis Xing's mansion, and I won't stop you. If you have the ability, you can do whatever you want. Xiao Wanru said calmly and raised her watery eyes with coldness. Fifth miss, I have a reason to come here. Yang reached into her bosom and took out a letter from her bosom. It looked like a letter. The yellowish color represented that it had been written for a long time. It was a letter that had been written for a long time. Fifth miss, I'm here to deliver a letter, not because Marquis Xing asked me to enter the mansion. It was inconvenient for me to say anything in front of Marquis that day, so I found Fifth Miss's mansion later. But later I heard that Fifth Miss was injured, so I couldn't enter Prince Chen's mansion. This time I heard that the princess of the Su state came to the capital city and was brought here by Prince Chen. I thought that Fifth Miss would definitely appear, so I stayed here and waited for Fifth Mississippi. Xiao Wanru didn't take it. She held the handkerchief tightly in her sleeves. Her face was still calm as if there was no fluctuation, but in fact, her palms were already sweaty. Her heart was beating so fast that she could hardly restrain herself. The letter? The letter? The title of servant, and the words that Yang asked someone to deliver when she came to see her in front of her mansion seemed to make her aware of a fact. However, was this true? Could what Xiao Jing's mistress said be true? What was the meaning of this letter? For you. After a long while, Xiao Wanru suppressed her excitement and asked slowly. Her eyes were as cold as ever, and her delicate little face was tense, showing a sense of dignity that other peers didn't have. Fifth Miss? Fifth Miss, do you really not remember Yang at all? When Fifth Miss was young, Yang often held Fifth Mississippi. At that time, Fifth Miss was still the first Miss, the only daughter of Infanta and heir of Duke Qinghua. Yang burst into tears. His words made Qing and Yu Jie's faces change dramatically. They looked at each other and were so shocked that they almost couldn't believe it. Was this actually the servant of the former heir of Marquis Xing and Infanta Qinghua? Qing had helped Xiao Wanru investigate the people at that time, and almost all of them had disappeared. It was said that something had happened in the war. Could it be possible that the girl in front of them was left after the war? If she was left by Xiao Jing, why did he take this girl named Yang as his mistress? Could it be that it was not just because he liked this woman? Tell me, what's going on? Xiao Wanru said with a bit of coldness in her voice. Chapter 11:28. Fifth Miss, I was Infanta's maid at that time. I left the capital city with Infanta and went to the border. I was also the one who escorted Infanta back to Duke Xing's mansion. After that, I saw heir of Duke Xing being born. Fifth Miss? Speaking of this, Yang burst into tears. Yu Jie subconsciously looked at her master, only to find that although Xiao Wanru's face was calm, the corners of her mouth were trembling slightly. She became flustered because she had never seen her master lose control like this. There was only the sad cry of Yang in the private room. As expected, it was something related to her parents. You? Why did you become second uncle's mistress? After a long while, Xiao Wanru said. Her voice was a little hoarser than before. It could be seen that this matter had a great impact on her. I was Infanta's maid and a member of the first branch. I came back with Infanta and had been serving her. Later, Infanta died. I wanted to follow heir of Duke Xing and serve him. Madame Jiang couldn't tolerate me and wanted to kill me. Marquis protected me and left. Since then, I have been with Marquis, Yang said with tears. This was something that she had to do. Her master was gone and she was suspected by others. She had no choice but to rely on Xiao Jing and did not dare to return to Marquis Xing's mansion. That was why she said that she was Xiao Jing's mistress. "What's the matter with this letter?" Xiao Wanru said with her eyes falling on the letter in Yang's hand. "This letter is from Infanta to you and to Fifth Miss." Yang pushed the letter in her hand forward and said with tears, "At that time, Infanta knew that she couldn't do it. It was rare for her to sober up, so she wrote a letter to Fifth Mississippi. If she could find Miss, she would give it to you. If she couldn't, then forget it." After I received the letter, the Commandery Princess passed away a few days later. I was taken away by the Marquis and the letter has been hidden with me. Even the Marquis didn't know about it. I'm a concubine and have been raised outside. I don't usually meet people, so I didn't know that Fifth Miss had been recognized. When I saw Fifth Miss that day, I heard from the Marquis that you had found her. Therefore, she didn't know about it. Then why didn't you tell Grandma that there was another me outside? You should know about General Qin, right? Xiao Wanru didn't take the letter, looked at Yang coldly, and asked word by word. Whether it was in her previous life or this life, no one knew about her earliest existence. Except for Xiao Jing and the Jiang family, no one else knew about it. However, it turned out that there was another person who knew about it. How could she trust the woman in front of her? Even if this woman cried with all her heart, she would not believe it. In his previous life, there was also such a mistress. It should also be her, but he had never seen her send a word to him. She had never had anything to do with him. He didn't expect that she would be so deeply involved with him. When her mother was found, she was already crazy and mentally abnormal. The girl in front of her should be normal, but she didn't say anything. She hid everything from her mother that she had a daughter. I know. But at that time, the Commandery Princess didn't allow me to say it. Although the Commandery Princess was a little abnormal, occasionally when she was sober, she told me not to mention you for fear of your safety. At that time, Madame Jiang was valued by Madame Dowager. The Commandery Princess was no match for her in normal times, not to mention that at that time, the Commandery Princess didn't allow me to say it. It should be okay to say you were there. Yang continued to cry. Fifth Miss, I'll listen to the princess. Since the princess said so, I'll do as she said. When the princess left with me, you and the former child were still fine. Later, the princess was sometimes clear-headed and sometimes confused. She said that you were protected by the former child, but she said that you were not safe even if you came back. She couldn't protect you. Xiao Wanru narrowed her eyes to hide the killing intent at the bottom of her eyes. She showed up when she couldn't hide it anymore. Not only did this woman betray her master, but she also hooked up with Xiao Jing and Xiao Yinru long ago, and even had something to do with her parents' affairs. But now it was not the time to fall out with her. Xiao Wanru calmed down the bloodthirsty feeling in her heart and asked coldly, "In this case, you followed second uncle? You are my mother's maid, so you will always be my mother's maid. It's not a big deal to follow second uncle. How can a brother-in-law marry his sister-in-law's maid?" Fifth Miss, I had no choice. I didn't have the power to protect myself at that time. Only Marquis was willing to protect me for the sake of child. Madame Jiang was cruel and merciless. I had no choice but to be forced out of the mansion. Since then, I have been protected by Marquis. Yang cried and said, no matter what Xiao Wanru asked, she could explain it. Xiao Wanru silently raised the corners of her mouth and restrained the inadvertent sarcasm on her lips. It was a perfect explanation, but it was too perfect, which made people feel it was unreal. Such a loyal maid had to become Xiao Jing's mistress in the end. All the sins were done by Madame of Jiang, and she was a loyal servant. Loyal servants were the most appreciated in aristocratic families. In such a situation, Xiao Wanru should stand on her side and trample on Madame of Jiang. What could be more humiliating to Madame of Jiang than to let her marry into the mansion as a co-wife? She appeared at a good time and had a better relationship with her. Even her maternal grandma might raise her to a higher level for the sake of her mother. In this case, it was not a big deal for her to become Marquis Xing's co-wife. After all, with the identity of Great Elder Princess, she could raise her status by recognizing an adopted daughter or daughter. So what if she was a concubine? As long as her status was high enough, everything could be settled. In an instant, Xiao Wanru had figured out the reason why Yang appeared here. Even if she didn't want to admit it, Xiao Wanru had to admit that the timing was good and the point was good. If she hadn't been reborn, she would probably have recognized her. There were so many helplessness. In fact, she had no choice but to come to this step. Taking the letter from Yang's hand, she almost couldn't lift it up. After calming down, she looked at it carefully. The letter was very old and there was no sign of opening it. It could be seen that it had been kept and no one had touched it. But so what? When it was written, Yang was reading it beside her. She must have known what was written in the letter clearly. It was even possible that she had instructed her mother to write it. After all, her mother was unconscious at that time. This letter must be written by her mother, but the content might not be true. Even though Xiao Wanru was very clear-minded, she still couldn't help feeling a lump in her throat. Her mother, the only daughter of R and great elder princess, used to be such a proud woman, ended up like this. It was all caused by Marquis Xing's mansion. One day, she would dig out all the things that happened in the past and avenge her parents so that they could rest in peace. In the letter? I don't know. I don't dare to read it, and I don't dare to let anyone see it. This is the last writing of the Infanta. Yang wiped her tears and said. Xiao Wanru slowly tore open the letter and looked at the handwriting on it. The handwriting was very delicate, but it was a little uneven. From time to time, some words would jump out, which was a little incongruous with the whole letter. It didn't look like a normal letter. Zhuizhua. The opening part was very clear. It was indeed written to her. Her heart was tugged hard, as if something had pierced her heart. This was a letter written by a mother to her daughter. She asked her to eat more and grow up well. She also asked her to live a good life with her father. In the future, their family would be reunited. At that time, her mother should have known her father's death, but in her delirious words, she still felt that her father was alive. After that, she talked about her servant girl Yang. She asked Xiao Wanru to take care of Yang if she had a chance to return to Marquis Xing's mansion when she grew up. She said that Yang was a loyal protector of her master. Without Yang, she couldn't have entered the capital city smoothly. She also said that Yang was a poor woman and followed her to repay her kindness. She talked about most of the things about her and a small part about Yang. Ru and great elder princess didn't mention anything about other people in the Marquis's mansion. She didn't even mention her younger brother in her belly, as if she just said it to her. After reading the letter and folding it, Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Yang again. I heard that before my father and mother left the capital city, they went to another place. Who did they go to see? Yang was stunned and hurriedly said, I don't know about it. Heir of Duke Xing went there alone. Later, I accompanied Infanta. However, heir of Duke Xing didn't go to the border at first. Later, he decided to go to the border. I think someone must have said something to heir of Duke Xing. However, I'm just a servant girl, so I don't know the details. You don't know that father took mother with him at that time? Xiao Wanru said meaningfully. Let me think about it. It's been too long. I'm old, so I can't remember some things. Yang wiped the corners of her eyes, recalled for a moment, and said, at that time, it seemed that someone sent a letter first. After heir of Duke Xing read it, he left with Infanta and went to a courtyard. They didn't leave until evening. But I really don't know who heir of Duke Xing met and what he said to them. Xiao Wanru looked at Yang carefully. This matter didn't matter to them. What she said should be true. Someone made her father change his way. Then, before leaving the capital city, her father went to see another person. Who was this person? Who was the last person her father saw before leaving the capital city? She had a lot of guesses in her heart, but she really couldn't guess who this person was. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Wanru put away the letter, looked a little relaxed, and asked, in this case, do you want to follow me in the future or go back to Marquis Xing's mansion? Yang was very hesitant. After wiping her tears, she said, if I didn't have a daughter, I would naturally follow 5th Mississippi. But now I have a daughter. Speaking of this, Yang burst into tears. What she meant was very clear. With a daughter, of course, she had to live a good life with Xiao Jing. Entering Marquis Xing's mansion was the best way. Chapter 1129. The private room was very quiet, with only the sound of Yin Yang crying. Xiao Wanru looked at her with watery eyes, which were quiet. Yin Yang had been crying. Hearing the inexplicable silence in the private room, she panicked for a moment. She could only look up at Xiao Wanru and said sadly, "Fifth miss, I know what happened to you. You can go back. Thank you for leaving my mother's letter to me." Xiao Wanru said, "Get up first." Yu Jie reached out to help Yin Yang up. Yin Yang still wanted to say something, but was sent to the door by Yu Jie and Qing. You are Marquis Xing's mistress. If you continue to make trouble, our princess will go to Marquis Xing. When Yu Jie pushed Yin Yang out of the door, she whispered in Yin Yang's ear. This sentence immediately stopped Yin Yang's idea of making a scene at the door. Looking at the tightly closed door, Yin Yang's heart turned 100 times. Finally, she wiped away her tears and stood at the door of the private room without crying or making a fuss. It was as if she was an ordinary servant, just waiting at the door for her master's call. Some masters brought a lot of servants with them, and there was also a guard outside the door. It was not abrupt for her to stand like this. In order to find her this time, Yin Yang did not wear gorgeous clothes. Some capable servants of aristocratic families also wore the same clothes. She couldn't leave like this, but she couldn't upset Princess Qin inside. Princess, she is still outside the door. Yu Jie stood at the door and listened for a while. She didn't hear the footsteps of Yin Yang leaving. Knowing that she was still there, she showed a trace of disgust on her face. She didn't like this woman called Yin Yang. Yu Jie didn't know whether it was because she had a preconceived idea or because she had so many things to do, but she just felt that this woman called Yin Yang was not trustworthy. Fortunately, the princess didn't keep her. This woman didn't seem to be a good person. A servant girl, she actually had a relationship with her master's brother-in-law. Many things could be said to be unpleasant, but it would ruin her master's reputation. Let her stay. Xiao Wanru slightly bit her cherry lips, and a trace of fierceness flashed across her eyes. Do you want me to drive her away? She's standing at our door. I think she's a servant of our mansion. Qing didn't like her either, so she said grumpily. She just couldn't stand the seductive look of this eunuch. Don't worry about her. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said, it doesn't matter whether it is or not. Since she refuses to stop doing something and wants to attract others' attention and force me to do it, I also want others to suspect her and investigate Xiao Jing. She was the most loyal servant girl by her mother's side. She had always been protecting her mother. In a letter left by her mother, her loyalty was also mentioned. As her mother's daughter, she would definitely support such a servant girl. Moreover, her enemy was the Jiang family. No matter from which aspect, she should help Yin Yang. But she didn't want to help. She wanted to see what Empress and Xiao Jing were going to do. She would never believe what this woman called Yin Yang said. These words were taken out of context. In fact, they did not tell the whole story. What she found out and what she guessed after her rebirth had always been in her mind. Because of Yan Shi's matter, she had confirmed part of the cause and effect. This time, no matter what Yin Yang said, she would not believe it at will. She was more willing to believe the facts she found out and the facts she saw in the last life. In the last life, she was weak. But it was useless. This woman called Yin Yang had never come to her. Later, she also entered Marquis Xing's mansion and angered Xiao Yenru in the Imperial Palace. But so what? She still entered the mansion safely and stood opposite to the Jiang family. In this life, she advanced step by step and got the help of Chu Luchen. Step by step, she got to where she was now, so Yin Yang came to her. Another thing she didn't understand was that in the last life, there seemed to be no new miss in Marquis Xing's mansion. Even when she died, there were only a few misses in Marquis Xing's mansion. Where did this illegitimate daughter come from? In the last life, since Yin Yang also entered Marquis Xing's mansion when the Jiang family was in power, it could be seen that this woman was not easy to deal with. Since she entered, how could her daughter not enter the mansion? Moreover, she was just a daughter. Even if the Jiang family didn't recognize an illegitimate son, they would recognize an illegitimate daughter. Moreover, the illegitimate daughter's mother entered the mansion above board. She was very concerned about this question in her mind. Was there something wrong with this illegitimate daughter? There was no such thing in the last life. In this life, because things had changed too much, there was such an illegitimate daughter? Was it the idea of Yang or Xiao Jing? There were thousands of conjectures in her mind, and it seemed that the truth was faintly coming to the surface. But when she thought about it carefully, she couldn't catch it or touch it. While she was thinking, there was suddenly a loud noise downstairs. Yu Jia looked at the window and hurriedly said, "Your Highness, Prince Yu has gone out of the city gate." Putting away the thousands of thoughts in her mind, Xiao Wanru walked to the window and looked out. Sure enough, she saw two groups of people coming out of the city. The people on both sides hurriedly got out of the way. The one in the front was the tall and handsome Chu Luiwe. When they arrived at the city gate, the horses stopped, and the 2 rows of guards behind them also pulled the reins and stood still. Some people in the crowd on both sides unconsciously cheered. There were also women's excited voices, "Prince Yu! Prince Yu! Long live Prince Yu!" The sons of the Chu royal family were all very good-looking, and Chu Luiwe was full of noble aura. When he stood at the city gate, he won the hearts of countless girls. Not only the young ladies of aristocratic families, but also some ordinary girls, with excitement and admiration in their eyes, looked at Prince Yu, who was riding on the horse. This prince was not only good-looking, but also likely to be the crown prince of the Eastern Palace in the future. Such an identity and appearance were indeed very attractive. The city gate was opened, and people came from the opposite side. The first carriage was a gorgeous one. The gauze was half-hanging, and a man in black could be vaguely seen leaning lazily inside. There was a cloud pattern on his thick black clothes, and the dragon claws were looming. He was wearing the rough clothes of a prince, which were the same as Chu Luiwe's, but inexplicably different from Chu Luiwe's. He looked more natural and noble. When the gauze was slightly opened, an extremely handsome face immediately attracted everyone's attention. Chu Luchen rarely appeared in front of the public like this. Few civilians in the capital had seen this sick and weak Prince Jin. In the past, they only heard that Prince Jin was in poor health and seemed to be unable to walk. Was this really the Prince Jin who was dying? Wasn't he fine? Is it Prince Jin? It's Prince Jin. It's really Prince Jin. The crowd became noisy again. The 2 princesses of the Su kingdom all stopped. At this moment, everyone seemed to forget that they were originally here to see the beautiful princesses of the Su kingdom. They all went forward just to take a look at Prince Jin. Everyone who saw this secretly nodded their heads. This Prince Jin was obviously fine and nothing had happened to him. Looking at his imposing manner, even Prince Yu, who was the first prince, couldn't be compared to him. Why were there always people cursing him to die? The rumors of the royal family were really untrustworthy. Previously, there were rumors that Prince Jin had entered the palace long ago. It was said that in order to come back before the Empress Dowager's birthday, Prince Jin traveled thousands of miles and finally entered the city on the Empress Dowager's birthday. Not to mention other things, it was impossible for him not to have a strong body. It seemed that Prince Chen's body was really fine. At this moment, the person that everyone was most interested in and focused on was actually Prince Chen. This was something that no one had expected. In the carriage behind, Princess Yu Yan's face turned livid with anger. In order to enter the capital today and give the whole capital a shocking image, Princess Yu Yan got up early in the morning and dressed up early. The purpose was to let people see her style. Moreover, the person who came to pick up today was Prince Yu. In order to prevent Princess Yu Tao from stealing her limelight, she even asked someone to find out Princess Yu Tao's attire early in the morning. After knowing that Princess Yu Tao's attire was not as outstanding as hers, she was relieved. But now she was angry. Princess Yu Tao didn't steal her limelight, but it was stolen by Chu Luchen. She felt very aggrieved. As a woman, she was actually not as good-looking as Chu Luchen. She had always denied this idea, but now she had to admit that this person had an enchanting face and was attracted to both men and women. The 2 parties met at the city gate. Chu Luiwe jumped out of the carriage neatly, but Chu Luchen didn't get out of the carriage. He asked Qin Huaiyong and Chu Qing to hand over the documents of both parties and called the envoy of the Su country over. All the procedures were completed by them. Chu Luchen still didn't get out of the carriage, but didn't leave either. He just waited aside. He raised his beautiful eyes and happened to see the window where Xiao Wanru was. He raised the corners of his mouth slightly. Xiao Wanru naturally also saw Chu Luchen. His carriage was parked very well and happened to be facing the window. He lifted the gauze in front of him a little, and the two of them looked at each other silently. Chu Luchen opened his mouth and seemed to say something to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru smiled at him and nodded. Opposite the private room, Infanta Yuan looked at the smile on Xiao Wanru's face and then lowered her head to look outside the city gate. There were many people below, so she couldn't see who Xiao Wanru was smiling at. Could it be Prince Qin? Infanta Yuan inexplicably felt that it didn't seem like it. It couldn't be Prince Yu, could it? She turned her eyes to a place outside the crowd. It happened to be on her side, but not directly below her. From her position, she could see clearly that Zhang Qilan and Luo Xiaowan were standing together, surrounded by a few maids to prevent them from being disturbed by the surrounding crowd. Zhang Qilan raised her head and looked at the opposite window. Xiao Wanru was opposite her without a smile on her face. After looking at her for a while, she moved her eyes back and fell on Prince Yu in the crowd, seeming to be a little angry. Coincidentally, at this time, Prince Yu raised his head. No one knew who he was looking at. The anger on Zhang Qilan's face was obvious. She turned around and left, and Luo Xiaowan hurriedly chased after her. Pa's smile appeared on Infanta Yuan Anne's lips. She understood. What she said before worked. End of this chapter. Crown Princess 49333 Dextop. Chapter 1130. The handover ceremony was not long. After the two sides met and exchanged a few friendly words, they returned to the city together. The crowd retreated to the side and watched the carriages in front pass by and land on the two carriages behind. They were the two princesses of the Su kingdom. Under the light veil, the faces of Princess Yu Tao and Princess Yu Yen were faintly discernible behind the veil, which made people feel that they were more and more beautiful. Two princesses are going to marry together? Someone asked in confusion. He had clearly heard that one of the princesses was going to marry. No way, I heard that there is only one. Another person replied. He had also heard the same thing. Who are they going to marry? Have you heard about it? A busybody asked in a low voice. They didn't care about how many princesses they were going to marry. What they cared about was who they were going to marry. Those princes all had their own wives. Even if they didn't officially marry them, they would marry them. Could it be Prince Xian? Someone asked. Except for Prince Xian, no prince was suitable. It's not necessarily Prince Xian's. The princesses who are going to marry each other are of noble status. They may also be other princes. At present, except for Prince Qin who is really married, the other princes are definitely not married. Someone raised a question, thinking that it was possible that they were not married. The princesses of Prince Qin and Prince Zhou are both extraordinary. It's not easy to get rid of them. Someone said disapprovingly. Watching the two princesses leave, there was a lot of discussion along the way. They were all guessing which family would marry the two princesses in the end. It seemed that they were not suitable for either family, but they were suitable for either family. Of course, some people said that the two princesses were concubines given by the Su kingdom to the emperor. If that was the case, it seemed to make sense. Almost everyone had guessed it, except for Chu Qing, who was in the carriages. As Chu Qing listened, his expression became more and more unsightly. Although he was not very willing to marry Princess Yu Yen, in the hearts of the common people, they did not take him seriously at all. After all, he was also the flesh and blood of the previous emperor. How could no one guess that it was him? Even when he passed by, they treated him as an ordinary person. All of this made Chu Qing extremely angry. He lowered his head and a trace of fierceness flashed across his eyes. One day, he would let everyone know who he was and he would trample on everyone. When the emissary from the Su kingdom entered the city, the onlookers naturally left as well. Everyone went back to what they were doing. Peace was restored at the city gate. Many guests from the private rooms came out and got on their horses or carriages. Xiao Wanru was not in a hurry to go back. At this time, she didn't want to join the crowd. Since she was out of the mansion, she wanted to take a good look and have fun. She had been locked up in the mansion for a long time and had wanted to go out for a long time. Now that there was such a good opportunity, how could she go back after taking a look? Princess, that woman is still here. Yujie walked to the door, peeked outside, and said in a low voice. Let her be. Xiao Wanru said calmly. Princess, she has been standing there for a long time. The guests in several private rooms saw it. When they left, they looked at us again and again. Just now, Qing secretly opened the door a crack so that she could see it more clearly. Princess, what does she want to do? Does she want to threaten you to help her enter Marquis Xing's mansion? Let her in. Xiao Wanru said lightly. Yes, I'll go and call her. Yujie answered, walked to the door and pulled it hard. She looked at Yin Yang, who had turned her head outside, and said, Come in and talk about it. If there's nothing, you'd better not disturb our master. Yin Yang lowered her head and said, I have one more thing to ask of you, Your Highness. Come in. Yujie said coldly. After saying that, she turned around and walked inside. Nyang hesitated for a moment and followed Yujie in. Your Highness. Seeing Xiao Wanru, Nyang wanted to bow to her again, but Yujie reached out to stop her. Just say what you want to say. If there's nothing else, I'll go back. Xiao Wanru stood up. Qing picked up the cloak on one side of the screen, put it on her, and took the curtain hat on one side. It seemed that she was going to put it on Xiao Wanru and was about to leave. Your Highness, I want to ask you to help me enter Marquis Xing's mansion. After I enter Marquis Xing's mansion, I will definitely help you. I will do whatever you want me to do. Yin Yang looked at Xiao Wanru with a pleading face, and tears fell down one by one. Your Highness, I am indebted to Infanta. If it weren't for Infanta, I wouldn't have survived. Do you mean that you should continue to follow me? Or do you want me to do something for you? Yin Yang, I can't help you now. If you can enter Marquis Xing's mansion, just do it. I won't interfere, Xiao Wanru said. Your Highness, when my daughter gets married, I will definitely repay your Highness's kindness and Infanta's kindness of saving my life back then. Nyang looked at Xiao Wanru excitedly and said, The past is the past. Mother, don't mention it anymore. Nyang, although you used to be my servant, you have nothing to do with me now. If you want me to do something for you, don't think about it. Marquis Xing's mansion has little to do with me, Xiao Wanru said calmly again. Your Highness, I'll kowtow to you again, Nyang said. After saying that, she pushed Yujie away, knelt down heavily, and kowtowed to Xiao Wanru 3 more times. Then she wiped away her tears, stood up, and used the previous title again. 5th Miss, I'm leaving. Go ahead. Xiao Wanru nodded. Nyang had no reason to pester her anymore. She wiped away her tears and left. She went out and wiped away her tears hard. At the door of the private room, she bowed to the people inside and said, Thank you, Your Highness. Her voice was not low, so everyone in the private room heard it clearly. Yujie's face changed dramatically. Master, I'll go and have a look. She said such words in front of so many people. This girl called Yang had evil intentions. Although there were many people who left, there were still some people who didn't. There were not many princesses in the capital city, but there was only one who was as old as her master. This obviously pointed out that the person in the private room was her master. It doesn't matter. Let her go. Xiao Wanru reached out to stop Yujie and shook her head. She listened carefully and heard Yang's footsteps leaving. Her eyes became deep. Did this girl have to have something to do with her? Others could not see that she refused Yang. What they saw was that Yang bowed to her respectfully. Xiao Jing wanted to make use of this woman, so did she. It was okay to drag her into this matter as long as she could find out what had happened in the past. The hatred of her parents was absolutely irreconcilable. Xiao Jing didn't seem to have much to do with her now. Now that Yang wanted to lean on her, she would let her lean on her. When she leaned on her, it was the same as giving her an excuse. At that time, he was also giving himself a reason. This person called Anyang was very suspicious. Let's go and see Nanny Dong now. Xiao Wanru stopped thinking about Anyang and stood up. The other thing she wanted to do when she went out today was to see Nanny Dong. At present, the matter of Butterfly Clothing Shop had been solved. The news that Butterfly Clothing Shop was going to be under her name had been spread out, and only the final formalities were left. Xiao Wanru didn't care about the final formalities at first. She just needed to wait for Nanny Dong to deal with it. Unexpectedly, this matter was still stuck there. Nanny Dong had sent a message about this matter before. She happened to be free, so she went to have a look. When they arrived at Butterfly Clothing Shop, Nanny Dong welcomed Xiao Wanru into the account room, took out an official document from behind the desk, and handed it to her. "Your Highness, this matter is stuck." Xiao Wanru took the official document and looked at it. The big red seal on it showed that it was from the Ministry of Justice. She couldn't help frowning. It was related to the Ministry of Justice. Even if it was a trivial matter, it couldn't be ignored. As Princess Chen, she couldn't underestimate this kind of thing. In fact, the owner of Butterfly Clothing Shop had always been Xiao Wanru. But at that time, she was young. When registering, she used Nanny Dong's name. She just borrowed it for a while. Both Nanny Dong and she knew that when they went to the bank to borrow money at that time, it was Xiao Wanru's own name, and when Shichi was the guarantor. If they investigated from these aspects, it was easy to find that Xiao Wanru was the owner of Butterfly Clothing Shop. But judging from such a registration, it was reasonable to believe that Nanny Dong was the owner. "Your Highness, it is said that a fugitive has done something in our shop before. Before the matter is figured out, the owner of the shop can't be changed." Nanny Dong said with a face full of shame, "Your Highness, it's all my fault. You can't even put the shop under your name legitimately. Needless to say, someone must have played tricks in it. The most likely person was Wei Dehai, who had been coveting the shop." "Is there such a person?" Xiao Wanru asked after reading it. "There is such a person. At that time, he worked in the shop for a few months and then left. No one knows what happened to him later or how he got involved. Now Butterfly Clothing Shop is involved. Your Highness, before this matter is figured out, you really can't meddle in it. Otherwise, people will think that Prince Chen's mansion wants to meddle in it." Nanny Dong nodded and said. She really didn't expect that an ordinary shop assistant actually had something to do with the case of the Ministry of Justice. But it was true. At this time, transferring the shop to Princess Chen would bring trouble to Princess Chen. Princess Chen was in the teeth of the storm, so it was not easy for her to cause trouble. "Can you make an appointment with Wei Dehai?" Xiao Wanru thought for a while and asked. Nanny Dong was shocked and asked excitedly, Is it going to talk about the shop?" "Yes, let's do it tomorrow," Xiao Wanru said with deep eyes. She didn't want to delay the matter of Butterfly Clothing Shop any longer. Although Wei Dehai was very important, the matter of Butterfly Clothing Shop could be separated from him. Prince Chen's mansion was in the teeth of the storm. She had to deal with this matter decisively, lest Wei Dehai got her involved. She stood in front of the desk and wrote a letter. "Nanny Dong, send this letter to Third Young Master, one of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion, and tell him that I asked him to be a witness." When Shichi was a witness to what had happened back then. Chapter 1131. The two princesses of the Su Kingdom and their entourage didn't stay in the relay station. Instead, they had prepared a residence for them. Chu Luchen separated from the others at the city gate and went straight to Prince Chen's mansion. Chu Luiwe sat on the horse and looked at the direction where Chu Luchen left. He was lost in thought. Originally, he didn't take Chu Luchen as his opponent, but now he didn't dare to underestimate Chu Luchen. The second princess of the Su Kingdom was going to marry Chu Qing. Only then did he know that it had nothing to do with Chu Luchen. The news that came before was not accurate. It was said that Princess Yu Tao was going to marry into the Su Kingdom. Princess Yu Tao had a special relationship with Chu Luchen. Previously, he wanted to test his father's mind by letting Princess Yu Tao marry into the Su Kingdom, but now he didn't need to do that anymore. Chu Luchen is not my father's son. Why can he inherit the throne like me? How can an uncle pass the throne to his nephew? She thought. How can an uncle pass the throne to his nephew? It must be because father was forced to do so, he had no choice. There was also concubine Lan in the harem. Because she was Chu Liuchen's aunt, Chu Luchun now had a legitimate reason to inherit the throne. He really didn't believe that his father would be so selfless and really make such a decision. Your Highness, our princess invites you in. A servant of the Su kingdom walked out and said to Chu Luiwei, who was sitting on the horse, with a smile. Chu Luiwei got off the horse and followed the servant inside. The courtyard was very busy, and everyone was tidying up things. Only Princess Yu Yen was in the living room, which surprised Chu Luiwei. Greetings, Your Highness Prince Yu. Princess Yu Yen rolled her watery eyes. When she saw Chu Luiwei come in, she stood up and saluted him. As the princess of a small country, she could not be rude to Chu Luiwei. Princess Yu Yen is too polite. When he got off the carriage just now, Chu Luiwei had already seen the faces of the two princesses clearly. He knew that the one in front of him was Princess Yu Yen, who was going to marry Chu Qing. The two of them sat down as host and guest. Princess Yu Yen is sitting here. If you feel any discomfort, you can tell this king. This king will naturally have someone replace her. Chu Luiwei said with a slight smile. He took the task of welcoming the guests, so he was in charge of all the affairs of the Su country in the capital city. Thank you, Your Highness. Yu Yen is far away from my homeland. I'm afraid I will have to trouble Your Highness in the future. Princess Yu Yen said softly. She slowly lowered her head and her eyes were slightly red. Marrying to another country, even if she was a princess of noble status, so what? The beauty in front of her was so outstanding, it really made one feel pity for her. In fact, I will accept Princess if I marry him as a concubine if I marry him. If I marry Chu Qing, I would become a prince of Qing's wife. Princess, you have left your homeland and married to Dongsong country. Dongsong country can't treat you badly. Chu Luiwei said gently. The maid served tea and respectfully retreated to the side. Your Highness Prince Yu, can you? Princess Yu Yan's face turned red, making her look even more lovable. Prince Qing. Princess. Please, Prince. I, Chu said. Kingdom he. Commandery Prince Qing is in the eastern Song Kingdom. Is he? Princess Yu Yan's gaze wandered as she said this. She was very shy. She lowered her head and held the handkerchief in her hand. Is Commandery Prince Qing unhappy? Commandery Prince Qing is my father's nephew. He is Prince Chen's brother. How can he be unhappy? Where did you hear that? Chu Luiwei said in surprise. Prince Yu, please forgive me. But Prince Chen and Commandery Prince Qing seem to be different. Aren't they brothers? Princess Yu Yen said. Her eyes were red and her tears fell. She looked extremely weak. My elder sister was supposed to marry him, but it's me. Princess Yu Yen was moved. She wiped her tears with her handkerchief. Princess Yu Tao of the Su country was married to Princess Yu Yen. Chu Luiwei wanted to know the reason. He heard that Princess Yu Yan's mother was very favored by Emperor Yan. She was the second son of Emperor Yan, so she should marry Princess Yu Tao. However, Chu Luiwei didn't know why Princess Yu Yen was married to Prince Qing. Princess Yu Yen, please say it. I also want to know the reason. Originally, Princess Yu Tao was married to Prince Qing, right? Chu Luiwei's voice became softer. He looked at Princess Yu Yen with a hint of sympathy in his eyes. Princess Yu Yen had never received this kind of sympathy before. Even in the kingdom of Mengmeng, when such a thing happened, her imperial father did not even look at her. He directly arranged for her to be married to the kingdom of Eastern Song. Even her imperial mother's crying and pleading were useless. Princess Yu Yen was full of grievances when she thought of it. She really didn't want to marry Chu Qing before, not before and not now. In her eyes, Chu Qing was useless. She was also a beautiful woman. Why was she so unlucky? When she saw Chu Luiwei looking at her with gentle and caring eyes, she forgot to act and was overwhelmed with sadness. My father was going to marry my elder sister, but later she schemed against me and Commandery Prince Qing, so I had to marry him. Princess Yu Yen covered her face with a handkerchief and cried. Princess Yu Yen, don't cry. Commandery Prince Qing is also a good person. He will definitely treat you well in the future. Chu Luiwei took out a handkerchief from his bosom and handed it to her to comfort her. The two palace maids standing behind Princess Yu Yen looked down and didn't move at all. Good person. Apart from this, there was no other benefit. The more Princess Yu Yen thought about it, the more she felt wronged. In fact, Chu Qing's character was not good. Otherwise, he wouldn't have colluded with her at that time. Of course, she didn't think that her character was not good. She only thought that Chu Qing was not good. If she married such a person, what hope would she have for the rest of her life? Reaching out to take the handkerchief from Chu Liyue's hand, she raised her tearful eyes and cried, "Actually, my request is very simple. I just want a husband who treats me sincerely, but Commandery Prince Qing has another woman in his heart. I heard that there is also a woman in the mansion who is a side concubine early." Because she cried so hard, her hand was a little trembling. She hooked her fingers with Chu Liyue's, and their fingers overlapped. Chu Liyue subconsciously reached out to touch her hand. Princess Yu Yen was so shy that she suddenly withdrew her hand. With a flushed face, she stood up and ran inside. She was so shy that she couldn't even speak. After bowing to Chu Liyue, the two palace maids also chased after her. Chu Liyue stood up with a smile and moved his fingers. The soft feeling just now was still between his fingers. It was very good. The women of the Su kingdom were really different from those of the Dongtsang kingdom. They were bolder than those of the Dongtsang kingdom. If she could volunteer to be a side concubine, it would be a lot of benefits for him. Of course, the premise was that she was willing. Otherwise, he would have to give up the position of princess to her. However, he couldn't bear to let Prime Minister Zhang go. The position of princess should be given to Prime Minister Zhang's daughter. Sitting together, it was a blessing to have Prime Minister Zhang as well as the backing of the Su kingdom. It was not bad. Before he met Princess Yu Yen, he didn't have this idea. At that time, he wholeheartedly schemed against Chu Luqian and wanted him to marry the princess of the Su kingdom as Princess Yu Yen so that he would never be able to inherit the throne. Now, seeing this charming and lovely Princess Yu Yen, Chu Liyue had an idea. In fact, it was not bad to be a side concubine and enter Prince Yu's mansion. At most, he would not let her give birth to children in the future. Even if she gave birth to children, she would not pass the throne to him. The inheritance of the throne would not be left to a foreign tribe, and his father and the courtiers would not say anything. In a flash, Chu Liyue had a new idea. Let Princess Yu Yen be a side concubine. This idea should be consensual. Princess Yu Yen was very dissatisfied with Chu Qing. Besides, Chu Liyue was also very confident that it was better to be a side concubine than to marry Chu Qing and be a Princess Yu Yen. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt relieved. He turned around and left with a smile. He had to discuss with his aides about how to do it. Of course, it was better to let Wen Shiqi make the decision. As soon as he left the mansion, Chu Liyue sent someone to invite Wen Shiqi to Prince Yu's mansion for a discussion. They had always been on good terms, so he was not afraid of gossip. When Chu Liyue returned to Prince Yu's mansion, the guards sent to Prime Minister Wen's mansion came back and said that third young master Wen was not in the mansion but in Huaguang Temple. Chu Liyue remembered that it was the first few days of the month, and Wen Shiqi often went to Huaguang Temple in these days, so he didn't think much about it. After returning to the mansion, he went to talk to his aides about this matter and discuss the feasibility of this matter. Wen Shiqi was really not in the mansion. He went to Huaguang Temple. At this time, he was sitting in the meditation room of the main temple of Huaguang Temple drinking tea. There was a chess game between them, but the chess pieces fell on the chess pieces. For a long time, there was no more chess pieces. "Master, I heard that you read my fortune for me when I was young. You said that I was destined to die prematurely and was so ill that I couldn't save myself. I had a belly full of knowledge, but I couldn't use it. I couldn't even protect my love and had to die miserably." When Shiqi put down the teacup in his hand, smiled slightly and asked. This fortune was really ruthless, but he said it calmly, as if he was talking about someone else's life. There was no ripple in his handsome eyes when he raised them. "Master, did you make a mistake?" When Shiqi finally said calmly. "Third young master, when a person's life will not change most of the time, but it can't be said that it will absolutely not change. Sometimes a small change will not only affect a person's chess game, but also change the whole game. The abbot of Huaguang Temple looked up with a kind smile. He put a chess piece in his hand, which immediately changed the stalemate of the chess game. He reached out to pull his sleeve and said, "Third young master Wen, please look." When Shichi's eyes fell on the chess game. "Master, what kind of chess piece do you think will cause all the changes? Is it possible? If it's like what you said, can I start again in my previous life and this life?" He also picked up a chess piece and dropped it in his hand. He actually turned the game into a killing game, which immediately made the Huaguang Temple host's chess pieces weak. You have your fate in your previous life, and you have your fate in this life. You in your previous life and you in this life are different. Third young master Wen, why do you cling to your previous life and this life? The abbot of Huaguang Temple did not put down another chess piece. He looked at Wen Shichi without a trace of anger, put his palms together, and said, "Third young master Wen, you are so smart. Don't you see it clearly?" Chapter 1132. When Shichi raised his head and looked at the abbot of Huaguang Temple in front of him, he stopped beating around the bush and said bluntly, "Master, I think I saw the previous life, but the previous life is different from this life. The fate of the previous life is the same as what you said, but this life deviates from the fate of the previous life." His words were beyond Fei's imagination, but when Shichi said it matter-of-factly without any hesitation, which showed that he was serious. The abbot of Huaguang Temple frowned and said, "Third young master Wen, if there is a previous life, do you think the previous life or this life is better?" When Shichi pursed his lips. In the previous life, he died of illness on the bed, but in this life, he could hold his head high. In this respect, of course, this life was better. But why did what he wanted in his heart almost have nothing to do with this life? He was unable to protect her in the previous life, but he could actually protect her in this life. But it seemed that it was a little too late. His heart seemed to be stabbed by something fiercely. "Master, the previous life has its sufferings, and this life has its sufferings. It's hard to tell which one is better." When Shichi said with a bitter smile. He had no answer whether it was better or not. The abbot of Huaguang Temple looked at him, paused for a while, and then said slowly, "Third young master Wen, you are obsessed." When Shichi reached out to touch his head and said with a wry smile, "I am indeed obsessed." "Master, what do you mean?" "The previous life has passed, and it's hard to find it again. Although it's a pity that I have good karma in this life, I have no regrets." The abbot of Huaguang Temple said with a chuckle. His words were like the evening drum and morning bell. When Shichi seemed to be awakened by something in his heart. He stood up and bowed deeply to the abbot of Huaguang Temple. "Thank you, master. This is the answer in your heart. You don't need to thank me." The abbot of Huaguang Temple also stood up and said with a smile. When Shichi shook his head, nodded, and then said goodbye to the abbot. The abbot of Huaguang Temple walked him to the door of the meditation room and closed his legs. When Shichi also turned back and bowed again. Then he turned and walked out of the meditation room. A servant had been waiting outside the door. Seeing Wen Shichi coming out, he hurriedly followed him. Outside the mountain gate, they got on the carriage and went down the mountain. Wen Shichi sat in the carriage with his head down. He was as calm as when he went up the mountain, but the servant felt a little different. It seemed that his young master had let go of something and became much more spirited, completely different from his previous decadence. The servant felt relieved. When he arrived at Prime Minister Wen's residence and alighted from the carriage, he saw a manservant running over with a letter in hand. Third young master Wen took a look at the letter, and a hint of joy appeared on his face. He waved the letter in his hand and said, "Reply that I'll be there tomorrow." "Yes, your servant will reply now." The manservant answered and retreated. "Third cousin." A sweet voice came from the corridor on one side. When Shichi frowned hard and then raised his head. His eyes fell on Gu Shishu, who ran a few steps with her skirt in her hand. "Third cousin brother, I've been looking for you for a long time. Why did you only come back now?" Gu Shishu was a little out of breath after running, and her towering breasts looked more attractive. She reached out to pull Wen Shichi's sleeve. When Shichi took a step back, avoided her hand and said bluntly, "Cousin, we are not children anymore. It's necessary to guard against men and women. But Gu Shishu's eyes turned red. Third cousin brother, you will always be the third cousin brother when we were young in my heart. We can play and talk together. After all, I've grown up now. When Shichi looked at Gu Shishu unmoved and said, So what? Aren't we cousins by blood? Gu Shishu said with a little shame and annoyance. She reached out to pull when Shichi's sleeve to kiss him again. So what? When Shichi took another step back and said, Cousin, if you have nothing to say, go back. After saying that, he ignored Gu Shishu, turned around and strode inside, leaving Gu Shishu looking at him with tears in her eyes. She looked extremely pitiful. After a few steps, they turned a corner and happened to meet second brother Wenxian. Unfortunately, they almost bumped into each other. They both took a step back before they could stand firm. Third brother, where did you come from? Why are you in such a hurry? Wenxian looked at Wenshichi and asked with a smile, but the smile looked very forced. However, his reaction was also very fast. When he first revealed his smile, it looked a little fake, but after a while he looked sincere. You came back from Huaguang Temple. Second brother, do you have something urgent to do? Wenshichi stepped aside and let Wenxian go first. I'm fine. I just saw my cousin and wanted to talk to her. How come I can't see her in the blink of an eye? Wenxian said with a trace of malice in his eyes. In fact, he saw Gu Shishu talking to Wenshichi just now. Wenshichi knew that Gu Shishu was his woman, but he did not avoid arousing suspicion and deliberately pulled Gu Shishu. How could Wenxian laugh? He was full of anger at Wenshichi. However, his younger brother had always been favored by his father and mother. If he really quarreled with him, his cousin might really marry Wenshichi in the end. How could Wenxian be reconciled to this? They were supposed to discuss the marriage between his cousin and his cousin recently, but his cousin said that Wenshichi went to his uncle's place to please him and tried to show that he was a good match. As long as he thought of this, Wenxian wished that Wenshichi was dead. When he was young, Wenshichi snatched toys from him. Now he even snatched his most beloved woman. Everyone in the mansion knew that Gu Shishu was his favorite. How could he have the cheek to oppose him? My cousin was at the door just now. I don't know if she is there now. Second brother, go and look for her. Wenshichi said with a smile. Okay, then I'll go first. I'll talk to you when I'm free. Wenxian nodded and smiled kindly. Then he walked to the door. Wenshichi continued to walk inside with a gentle smile, but there was a trace of deepness in his eyes. He would not let go of Wenxian and Gu Shishu. Even if this life was different from his previous life, he would not have any regrets. What? Looking for me? Wei Dehai was stunned for a moment and asked the servant in astonishment. Yes, shopkeeper Dong wants you to go there tomorrow. She said that she wants to settle the matter of butterfly clothing shop. The servant nodded and said, What does she mean? Wei Dehai turned to his wife, Ouyang, who was sitting beside him, and asked in confusion. He knew very well what kind of person Dong Minyoung was. Did she show weakness at this time? It didn't seem like something she would do. At that time, she would have taken the child in her belly and left. She wasn't at the end of her rope yet. Why would she show weakness? This was different from their previous plan. Master, go and have a look tomorrow. Since she dares to do this, I dare to take people to make trouble. Where does the property of a mistress come from? Isn't it all old masters? Ouyang sneered and put the teacup in her hand on the table. She glanced sideways at Wei Dehai and said, I just don't know if you are willing to give it to me. Don't you know what I'm thinking? We have been husband and wife for so many years, and we are of one heart and one mind. How can I still miss Dong Minyoung? Besides, she only gave birth to a daughter. Do I lack a daughter? Wei Dehai shook his hand and said indifferently, That's not necessarily true. I heard that she is the old lover that you have been thinking about for many years. Ouyang said in a mixed tone. Wei Dehai reached out to take her hand and comforted her. Madam, how have I treated you for so many years? Don't you know that? Only when you and I are one can we have a better future. At this time, I will not make a wrong step. I still know that thousands of miles of ant nest will be destroyed in one day. Hearing him say this, Ouyang snorted and the expression on her face became better. It's best that you think this way. Think about our plan. In the future, you will definitely become a great official. You are so knowledgeable, but you are only a small fourth-rank official. I really feel unfair for you. Hearing Ouyang Shi's words, Wei Dahai was very depressed. He sighed heavily and let go of Ouyang Shi's hand. This was indeed the most displeasing part of his heart. He believed himself to be talented, but because there was no one in the court, he had wasted his time until now. This was thanks to the help of his father-in-law. Otherwise, he didn't know where he would be now. But his father-in-law passed away early, so there was no one in the court. As for Nanny Wei, he found her later. He originally thought that after finding Nanny Wei, he could have a meteoric rise. He didn't expect that with just a little change, he would go from a powerless fourth-rank official to a fourth-rank official with real power. Thinking of this, Wei Dahai was a bit angry at Nanny Wei. She said that Nanny Wei was the favorite of the Empress Dowager, but she couldn't even help her own nephew. Master, don't be angry. There is a chance, and it is in front of us. It was good, but because of Chioi. Ouyang sighed and waved her hand with a headache. She said to the servant who reported the news, "Go and tell him that Master will go tomorrow." Speaking of Imo Chioi, Wei Dahai also had a headache. Commandery Prince Qing was a good wife, but because of this princess from the Su Kingdom, she became a concubine. Imo Chioi wanted to be the legal wife of Commandery Prince Qing for the future. If Commandery Prince Qing conquered the world in the future, the position of legal wife would be the position of empress. How could she give it up? However, Princess Yuyen was the princess of the Su Kingdom, whose status was far higher than Imo Chioi's. Commandery Prince Qing's mother tried her best to protect Chioi. Besides, according to the news from Commandery Prince Qing's mansion, it seemed that the old princess of Commandery Prince Qing was also satisfied with Princess Yuyen and had no objection. She had no objection, but the Wei mansion had a very strong objection. They had planned for so long, but they got nothing in the end. How could they be reconciled? Therefore, Nanny Wei's shop became the most important thing. Even if they suffered a loss from Nanny Wei, the Wei mansion didn't intend to let it go. The most important thing at the moment was money, and Butterfly Clothing Shop was determined to get it. Okay, I'll go there tomorrow. You can come after you calculate the time. Seeing the servant leave, Wei Dahai gritted his teeth and said, he couldn't be defeated at this time. Let's think about it again. We must get Butterfly Clothing Shop in one fell swoop. Chapter 1133. Wei Dahai was very cautious. This cautiousness made him like a fish in water for so many years, and it also helped him escape several disasters. Therefore, he believed in his cautiousness very much. However, Madame Dong's previous incident had frustrated him. He had thought it was not a big deal. It was just a businessman, and it was a woman who was involved with him. Even if so many years had passed, so what? In the end, she had to obey his arrangements obediently. So he was careless, and the result of his carelessness was that he provoked Princess Qin. Wei Dahai didn't care about Princess Qin, who had just married Prince Qin. Prince Qin was famous for his short life. He wouldn't care much about a woman who was bound to be a widow. But he didn't expect that this matter not only involved him, but also punished his backer, Nanny Wei, so that Nanny Wei was very angry now. She had sent someone to reprimand him, and even knew that he had asked someone to pretend to be Dong Minyoung. Early in the morning, Wei Dahai appeared in the tea house opposite Butterfly Clothing Shop and asked for a private room, facing the shop of Butterfly Clothing Shop. From this position, he could see the people coming and going in Butterfly Clothing Shop. He sat there for the whole morning. This morning, Butterfly Clothing Shop was very peaceful. No abnormal people appeared. They all seemed to be ordinary customers. From time to time, a waiter would send them out with a smile. The flow of customers was very good. Most of the people coming and going were misses and madams from aristocratic families. After they came out, the servant girls held the objects in their hands and smiled. It could be seen that they were very satisfied with the things of Butterfly Clothing Shop. Wei Dahai estimated that the income of Butterfly Clothing Shop was a lot when he checked it in the morning. He became more and more eager. He needed money now. It was not good for him to accept Dong Minyoung's shop. Besides, if he married Dong Minyoung as his co-wife, Dong Mingyang would not suffer a loss, and he could treat her fairly. Thinking of this, she increasingly felt that her idea was right, and it was also good for Dong Mingyang. However, she didn't know why Dong Mingyang was bewitched by Princess Chen and wanted to sell the shop to Princess Chen wholeheartedly. However, he would not let Princess Chen succeed so easily. He deliberately investigated the butterfly clothing shop. Before the matter was clear, the butterfly clothing shop would not change its owner, so he still had a chance to get it. The key to this matter was Dong Mingyang. As long as Dong Mingyang changed her words, everything else could be discussed, and Princess Chen could not use her power to oppress others. Now that Prince Chen was powerful, people were afraid, but at the same time, Prince Chen's mansion was at the peak of the storm. At this time, it was best for Prince Chen's mansion to keep a low profile. From this point of view, Wei Dahai concluded that Princess Chen could not make trouble at this time, and did not dare to make trouble. If she ruined Prince Chen's plan, what benefits could she get as a woman? After thinking about this, Wei Dahai also relaxed. Then he ordered a few plates of snacks in the tea house and didn't go downstairs. He continued to keep an eye on them. He was very relieved that the carriage of Prince Chen's mansion didn't appear. It seemed that this was really Dong Mingyang's idea. Seeing that it was almost time, he pulled his clothes, stood up, and went downstairs with a trace of complacency on his face. In this case, the butterfly clothing shop was in his pocket. If Dong Mingyang was sensible, she would consciously put the shop under his name. If she didn't, she would be his mistress if things got out of hand. Anyway, his official position was not high, and he was not in the top position in the capital city. Who would do such a trivial thing? If his wife and he were willing to accuse him, Dong Mingyang would not say anything even if she was in the wrong. Thinking of this, he became more and more sure. When Wei Dahai stepped into the door of Butterfly Clothing Shop, a shop assistant immediately saw him and greeted him with an unhappy look. He reluctantly cupped his hands to him and said, "Master Wei." All the people in Butterfly Clothing Shop knew Wei Dahai. They knew that Wei Dahai had schemed against their shopkeeper, so few of them would be nice to him. "Where's your shopkeeper?" Wei Dahai said indifferently. The worse the attitude of the shop assistant was, the more it meant that Dong Mingyang really had something to ask him. "The shopkeeper is in the accounting room." The shop assistant pointed to the accounting room in the corner. The accounting room on the top floor was much larger than the one upstairs. In the past, it was the main place where Madame Dong dealt with affairs. Wei Dahai waved his hand indifferently and said, "I'll go to Madame Dong myself." He didn't need the shop assistant to lead the way, so he took the servant there with him. When they arrived at the slightly closed door, he asked the servant to wait outside and walked in. The servant understood. After he entered, he closed the door and waited outside. Behind the wide desk, Madame Dong raised her head and looked at Wei Dahai coldly. Wei Dahai was not surprised by Madame Dong's attitude. He came in with a smile, sat on the chair opposite the desk, and leisurely put his hand on the desk. "Madame Dong, what can I do for you?" "Wei Dahai, you know the answer, don't you?" Madame Dong threw the account book on the table impolitely and said sternly, "Wei Dahai, we have nothing to do with each other now, and this butterfly clothing shop has nothing to do with you. This shop now belongs to Princess Chen. Do you dare to do anything to Princess Chen?" "I don't dare to do anything to Princess Chen, but does your shop really belong to Princess Chen?" "Madame Dong, I know you have always been stubborn, but what's the benefit of being so stubborn? You've been deceived for nothing. Do you really think that everything will be fine if you rely on Princess Chen?" Wei Dahai leaned back and said nonchalantly. He glanced around and found that there was no one else in the room except for Madame Dong. This was good. Of course, he had also calculated that there was no one else around Madame Dong. She was not a madam of an aristocratic family, so there was no one to serve her. At most, the shop assistants would come over occasionally. How could they stay by her side all the time? Behind the wide screen was the account book, so he couldn't help feeling excited. "Did you do something to my shop?" Madame Dong glared at Wei Dahai and said, "Madame Dong, why do you always say that? What's the relationship between us? How could I do something to your shop? If you're not good, how can I be good? What happened in the past was really a misunderstanding. In fact, I wanted to marry you wholeheartedly. It was just a freak accident. Wei Dahai sighed, as if he didn't see the anger on Madame Dong's face. It could be said that the angrier Madame Dong was, the calmer Wei Dahai was. He even had a smile on his face and looked at Madame Dong with a little indulgence in his eyes, which almost made Madame Dong want to vomit. Such a man spoke as if he was a Casanova, as if she was the one who was fooling around. Taking a deep breath, Madame Dong calmed down the anger in her heart, and her eyes darkened. Wei Dahai, I don't care what you plan to do. I can tell you clearly that I don't like you at all now. Don't think that you can still deceive me like before. Speaking of this, Madame Dong looked at Wei Dahai with disdain and sneered. Madame Ouyang didn't give you money, did she? Look at how eager you are now. It can be seen how poor you are after marrying Madame Ouyang. It's almost the same as before. After all, you are a man who lives off a woman. I can understand why you are so eager to make money. For the sake of our friendship, I can give you some. As Madame Dong said this, she took out a piece of silver worth about 10 taels from her sleeve cuff and pushed it in front of Wei Dahai. She did not hide the sarcasm in her eyes. Wei Dahai, don't plot against me. If you really can't live on, just take this silver and leave. Don't bother me in the future. Our friendship is only worth this much. Looking at the silver on the table, even if Wei Dahai had a good temperament, he couldn't bear it anymore. He suddenly stood up, slammed the table hard, and said angrily, Madame Dong, what? Do you want to hit me because you failed to cheat me? Madame Dong also stood up, stared at Wei Dahai, and said loudly, You are a man who lives off a woman. What ability do you have to marry a co-wife? It's your wife who wants to marry a co-wife and wants money, isn't it? The words, living off a woman, made the blue veins on Wei Dahai's forehead stand out. This was the last thing he wanted to hear. It would remind him of when he was still a poor boy, especially now that it was Madame Dong who said it. No one knew that part of the past except for Madame Dong. These words almost slapped him hard in the face. It seemed that he was in charge of everything in the mansion, but in fact, it had always been Madame Ouyang who was in charge. This kind of feeling of grievance was the weakness he cared about the most, and now it was unceremoniously torn apart by Madame Dong. Madame Dong, don't be so shameless. Wei Dahai was furious and said harshly. Madame Dong said coldly, Wei Dahai, do you really think you can defeat me? You brought the case of the Ministry of Justice to Butterfly Clothing Shop. You're really capable. Do you really think that Prince Chen's mansion can't do anything to you? Madame Dong said coldly. So what? If she has the ability, let her do it herself. Wei Dahai was so angry that he didn't care about hiding what had happened before. With a fierce look in his eyes, he stared at Madame Dong like a fighting cock. Originally, he had planned to take the gentle route when he came in, but Madame Dong made him so angry that he lost all his self-restraint for so many years. So it's true that you're the one who did it behind the scenes? Wei Dahai, how dare you do this to Prince Chen's mansion? Don't you think that you don't have the ability? No matter how uncomfortable Wei Dahai was, Madame Dong would say that. Even if they fell out with each other, she would not save him any face. Does the madam of your mansion know about this? Or is it her idea again? Wei Dahai, you're really promising. You even have to ask her about this kind of thing. Madame Dong had seen that woman before. It was also that woman who forced her to go to another place. Otherwise, not only would she die, but she would also lose the child in her belly. Madame Dong had always kept this matter firmly in her heart and never mentioned it to anyone. Now she tore it apart mercilessly. Chapter 1134. If you still want to follow him, then don't blame me for aborting the child in your belly. Our family doesn't need the birth of the eldest son of a concubine. What's more, we don't know if this bastard is real or not. If you want to follow young Master Wei, you can be a servant girl. You're just a lowly woman. How dare you dream of climbing the high branch? You're really shameless. All the obscenities were spewed out. At that time, the woman sat on the ground with her arms tightly around her belly. She looked helplessly and vigilantly at the crowd in front of her and the lady who was surrounded by them. It seemed that everything had happened again today. Although time had left a deep mark on the woman's face, Madame Dong still recognized the woman in front of her at a glance. It was Miss Ouyang. Madame Ouyang, who should be Madame Wei Dehai now. After so many years, it seemed that the scene of the past had reappeared. Husband, is this the mistress you've been looking for? A woman who has been raised outside for so long? Ouyang stood there and looked at Madame Dong contemptuously. The meaning of her words immediately made people understand that this was the so-called legal wife coming to catch the daughter of the mistress. Many people who came to watch the scene immediately became restless and looked at Madame Dong with contempt. What's the matter? Madame Dong asked. A mistress who was caught by the legal wife was a mistress. Looking at the man and the woman alone inside, needless to say, it was really the case. Madame Ouyang, right? Your husband is here to talk business. It's fine if Madame Ouyang doesn't know. But if she knows, she still says so. Isn't she afraid of being rebellious? Madame Dong snorted coldly. Now she was not the orphan girl who had nothing. In order to protect the child in her belly, she fled in the night. Rebellious? Madame Ouyang said coldly. She was the first branch who had all the glory now. She looked at Madame Dong with disdain. You're just a shopkeeper. How dare you say such a thing? Who gave you such courage? You and my husband were in a relationship, and my husband opened this shop for you. I know all these things now, and it's time to put an end to it. It turned out that the shop was opened by Wei Dehai for Madame Dong. Many people looked suspiciously from Wei Dehai's face to Madame Dong's face. Was it true? If not, what was the meaning of the two of them secretly meeting in private? Nonsense. When our shopkeeper opened this shop, she had never seen this Mr. Wei. A shop assistant who had worked here for a long time said angrily on behalf of Madame Dong. The shop assistant was also there when Madame Dong opened such a shop, so he knew about it. Husband, are you that interested in this woman? You took out all the money in the mansion to invest in her, and now you actually want to help her plot against me, the legal wife, husband? If you really like her, just take her in. Why do you have to do this? Ouyang Shi ignored the waiter and looked at Wei Dehai with tears in her eyes. The sadness in her eyes made people feel pity for her. In fact, if this was true, then Madame Ouyang was also a victim. Thinking of this, some people began to sympathize with Madame Ouyang. Madame Ouyang, food can be eaten indiscriminately, but words cannot be spoken indiscriminately. I don't know how Madame saw that I and Sir Wei weren't discussing business. Or could it be that Madame Ouyang came here to cause trouble? Before Wei, the matter of Darren plotting against my shop has yet to be resolved, but now Madame Ouyang is planning to not let it go? Madame Dong said calmly. She's just an outsider. What business is there to talk about? They're talking business behind closed doors. How can a man and a woman talk business alone? Sex business? A few people in the crowd ridiculed. Their words were extremely unpleasant to hear. Madam, I really like Madam Ming. We already have a daughter. The anger on Wei Dehai's face had disappeared, revealing a look of bewilderment. Stamp his foot, his feet seemed to have been forced into a corner. As soon as these words came out, it immediately confirmed that there was indeed a relationship between the two of them, and they even had a daughter. If this wasn't keeping a mistress, then what was? Those who had been hesitating whether or not they were wrong immediately stood on the Ouyang clan's side. She really is a lowly person. She has already given birth to a daughter, but she still doesn't acknowledge it. She doesn't want such a woman even if she is sent to the door. Now she even dares to talk back to the legal wife. Although she knew that Wei Dehai was shameless, she didn't expect him to be so shameless. Madame Dong was angry and hateful, but she didn't say anything and stepped back. A neatly dressed servant girl came out from behind the wide screen. Her appearance stunned everyone. Didn't they say that there were only a man and a woman talking business in the room? How could there be other people? Wei Dehai's eyes immediately narrowed. He had been in the room for so long, but he didn't find anyone behind the screen. Master Wei, our master was talking with Madame Dong before. Master Wei rushed in, so our master avoided him. Now she can be regarded as a witness. She glanced at Wei Dehai and Ouyang and said, Our master said that Madame Dong can report this matter to the authorities. Madame Dong is Lord Wei's first wife, and she was separated by you too. Do you want to force her to marry you again? Ouyang Wei's face darkened. Her words immediately explained that there was a child between Madame Dong and Wei Dehai. It turned out that Madame Dong was not a mistress, but the first wife. The current legal wife was the source of the disaster that broke up the family. The people who had been pointing fingers at Madame Dong immediately turned to Madame Ouyang. This was a marketplace, and some words were certainly not pleasant to hear. Madame Ouyang's face turned red with anger. Today, she and Wei Dehai planned to catch the adulterer and force Madame Dong to agree to enter the Wei's mansion. Unexpectedly, the master who suddenly appeared at the moment was also in the room. Not only was she in the room, but she also explained the grievances between them and Madame Dong in a few words. At this moment, people with discerning eyes immediately understood what was going on. What kind of person is your master? Sneaking around and stealing, what's the meaning of this? Madame Ouyang was furious. She pointed her finger at Yu Jie. Madam, you'd better not know who our master is. As for sneaking around, Master Wei just rushed in. What's wrong with our master avoiding him? I just didn't expect to hear such a wonderful scene. Forcing a good woman to be a concubine, Master Wei is really wonderful. I just heard that Master Wei lives off a woman. Now I see Madame Ouyang, he really deserves to be a woman's husband. Yu Jie was the most unforgiving person with her mouth. At this time, she did not intend to spare Madame Ouyang. She sneered and replied, "How dare you?" Madame Ouyang had never been said to her face like this. She was a maid. She was so angry that she took a step forward and was about to slap Yu Jie in the face. Wei Dehai's face darkened. He glared at Yu Jie angrily. He hated people who lived off a woman the most. He was so angry that his face turned livid and the corners of his mouth twitched. He could not say a word. Yu Jie took a step back to avoid Madame Ouyang's hand. She suddenly smiled and said, "Master Wei and Madame Wei, do you mean that this shop originally belonged to your family?" Coincidentally, Madame Dong happens to have a witness here who can prove that this shop has nothing to do with your family. It hasn't been long since you found Madame Dong. In order to get this shop, you will do anything. You too, please. The officials of the Ministry of Justice will come later. Unexpectedly, the officials of the Ministry of Justice intervened. Wei Dehai and Madame Ouyang looked at each other and immediately knew that something bad had happened. Wei Dehai himself did not have much power. Some things were done in a roundabout way, and even the people who did it did not know that he was in charge. "Master, how do you explain this? What did you tell me? For this woman, you actually lied to me like this?" Madame Ouyang reacted quickly. She immediately turned to Wei Dehai. Her lips trembled, and 2 lines of tears fell down. She meant that she did not know anything and was deceived by Wei Dehai. "Madam, I really want to marry Madame Ming. At that time, we separated because of a misunderstanding. I was afraid that Madame would not allow it, so I had to say that to you." Wei Dehai cooperated very well. He immediately became sad and looked at Madame Ouyang with a sad face. This made the onlookers confused again. They looked at one person and then at the other. Finally, their eyes fell on the face of Madame Dong, who seemed to be an outsider at this time. She also looked calm, as if the couple were talking about someone else. "You too, please. Our master is waiting for you inside. This matter has to be explained clearly, so as not to make such a thing happen again." Yu Jie gave way to the side and looked at the couple with a faint smile. "I don't care." Madame Ouyang seemed to be extremely sad. She waved her sleeves and was about to leave in tears. However, when she turned around, she found that there were people behind her. There were 2 old maids standing behind her. "Madame Wei, please. Our master will help you explain today. Even if our master can't explain clearly, there is still the Ministry of Justice, right? Don't worry. The Ministry of Justice has always been impartial and will not make things difficult for you." Yu Jie looked at Madame Ouyang with a smile and said. The 2 old maids behind her pressed forward impolitely. Although the Wei's mansion also brought old maids, they were obviously less imposing than these 2 old maids. In addition, Madame Ouyang did not dare to really make a move at this time. She didn't know who the master inside was. Wei Dahai's official position was too low, and there were too many people in the capital city who were higher than him. If they really made trouble, she was afraid that something bad would happen. Madame Ouyang had to retreat into the room. Watching the door being slammed shut, she turned around and looked at Yu Jie with a relaxed face. She wiped her tears with a handkerchief and looked at Yu Jie. I really didn't know about this. After so many years, my husband still hasn't forgotten his love. If I knew, I would never let him come to this butterfly clothing shop. She insisted that she didn't know and was deceived by Wei Dahai. Then she said that Wei Dahai really loved Madame Dong. This was what they had discussed before. They were afraid that something unexpected would happen. At this time, it was just the right time to use it. Madame Ouyang secretly thought that with such a statement, she could at least protect Wei Dahai and herself. Who is this master? Why does he help Madame Dong? Chapter 1135. The door was half closed, blocking everyone's curious eyes. Many people had wanted to eavesdrop, but the two rough old maids standing at the door were obviously not to be trifled with. The idlers all left and pointed at the door, focusing on whether what the madam said was true or not. Could it be that the couple really plotted to seize the wife's property? If that was really the case, then this couple was really vicious to be able to do such a thing. Many people did not leave. Although they could not see the scene, they could at least hear the sound. There must be a plan to solve this matter in the end, but it depended on who was in the wrong. In the accounting room, the screen was pulled open by two strong old maids, and they saw Xiao Wanru sitting in the wide chair behind the screen. Wei Dahai's eyes involuntarily twitched and he subconsciously took a step back. He recognized Xiao Wanru. Ouyang looked at Xiao Wanru and did not recognize her for a moment. At this time, it was inconvenient to ask Wei Dahai, so she just looked Xiao Wanru up and down. At the sight of Xiao Wanru's momentum, she knew that she was not an ordinary girl. She looked elegant and noble. What puzzled Ouyang at the moment was that she looked young but dressed like a married woman. She was not a miss from an aristocratic family. With a trace of panic in her eyes, she thought of who she was. Princess Chen, who had just married into Prince Chen's mansion, seemed to be young. It was said that she had not reached marriageable age. Lord Wei and Madame Wei, it seems that you know who I am, right? Xiao Wanru looked at the couple calmly and said lightly, I heard clearly what Lord Wei said to Nanny Dong in the room just now. I heard that Nanny Wei framed me for Lord Wei's sake. Now Butterfly Clothing Shop has been sued. As a fourth-level official, Lord Wei has great power. Wei Dahai's face changed dramatically. Lord Wei seems to know me? Xiao Wanru asked. After being stunned for a moment, Wei Dahai hurriedly said carefully, I've seen you in Marquis Xing's mansion. Marquis Xing's mansion? I thought it was when I came to Butterfly Clothing Shop before. Lord Wei seemed to want Butterfly Clothing Shop very much. Xiao Wanru smiled and said leisurely, This is Madame Ming's. I want to be with Madame Ming. If you put the shop under my name, Madame Ming and the child can come back. Wei Dahai murmured and restrained the panic in his heart. He never thought that Princess Chen would really find him and hide inside to eavesdrop on their conversation. Xiao Wanru sneered in her heart. At this time, Wei Dahai still wanted to deceive her with such words. Your Excellency Wei, let's not talk about who is right and who is wrong between you and Madame Dong. As for this shop, don't even think about it. This shop was originally mine. Now it's under my name again. Do you have any objection? Xiao Wanru asked. What? Wei Dahai widened his eyes in shock and looked at Xiao Wanru in disbelief. Lady Ouyang also raised her head in astonishment. She looked at Nanny Dong and then at Xiao Wanru. They had planned for so long and regarded the shop as theirs. Now they actually said that the shop did not belong to Nanny Dong. Then what was their previous plan? Not only did they waste their efforts, but they also became a joke. Madame Ouyang calmed down a little and said, Princess Chen, I know that you have a noble identity, but you can't rob a good person's property. Madame Wei, I'm afraid you've made a mistake. I was still young at that time, so it was inconvenient for me to show up, so I asked Nanny Dong to do it. Nanny Dong came to the capital city with me. Because I had no extra money, I specially went to the bank to mortgage a loan, so that I had liquid capital. At that time, the person who helped me mortgage was also a person of the Ministry of Justice. The formalities were complete, and the bank also had a record. Xiao Wanru said with a smile, reached out to take the tea from Yujie, and took a sip slowly. What she wanted to do now was to interrupt Wei Dahai's delusion. The princess of the Su kingdom entered the capital city and made the situation in the capital city chaotic. At this time, Prince Chen's mansion should keep a low profile. In the past, she didn't mind keeping Wei Dahai in suspense, but now she couldn't. She had to cut the Gordian knot so that Wei Dahai would not dare to think about butterfly clothing shop again, so that she wouldn't be distracted. After knocking on the door gently, Yujie hurriedly went forward and opened the door. When Shichi appeared at the door with a gentle smile on his face, Wei Dahai involuntarily stepped back. He knew when Shichi. Your Excellency, thank you. Xiao Wanru stood up and bowed politely. It doesn't matter. It's my duty. When Shichi cupped his hands to Xiao Wanru. After greeting each other, the two of them took their seats respectively. Yujie served the tea and stepped back behind Xiao Wanru. As for Wei Dahai and his wife, they still stood like this. No one invited them to sit down, let alone served them tea. Your Excellency, when I took the mortgage, you were the guarantor. Now I wonder if you can be a witness to prove that this shop used to be my shop, but I was young at that time, so I specially entrusted it to Nanny Dong to manage, right? Xiao Wanru asked. Yes, the contract at that time still exists. When Shichi nodded, took out a few pieces of contract paper from his sleeve, put them on the table, and said in a businesslike manner, Please have a look, Princess Chin. Are these the right ones? Xiao Wanru motioned for Yujie to take them. After taking them and looking at them, she said in surprise, Thank you, Your Excellency. I didn't expect that I would get such great help from you when I just met you once. Now I have to trouble you to be a witness for me. When Shichi was really thorough. As soon as she said so, he immediately got the evidence. It happened 3 years ago, and it was related to when Shichi's ability that he could get it so smoothly. Princess, you're too polite. It's just a piece of cake. When Shichi turned to Wei Dahai and said, Your Excellency, this shop was bought by Princess Chen at that time. Coincidentally, it used to be my friend's shop. I happened to be there that day. Seeing that Princess Chen, such a young girl, had such a great ambition, I specially helped her and got this shop. Since Your Excellency Wei has taken a fancy to this shop and is determined to seize it, in my opinion, let's go to court. Go to court? Wei Dahai's face was ashen, and his hands trembled in his sleeves. How could he go to court in this situation? Who was Wen Shichi? With him as a witness and these contracts, he could not only lose the case, but also had no future in the future. He had concluded that Princess Chen did not dare to make a big deal of the matter because he thought that Princess Chen just took a fancy to the people of Butterfly Clothing Shop. It turned out that Butterfly Clothing Shop belonged to Princess Chen. How could he seize it? There was also Wen Shichi as a witness. Not to mention that Wen Shichi was the third son of the Prime Minister and had an excellent reputation, he was now serving in the Ministry of Justice. His position was similar to his, but he had real power. How could he, an insignificant fourth-grade official, snatch Princess Chen's shop from her hands? His legs felt weak, and he reached out to hold the corner of the table to steady himself. Your Excellency, there's no need. This is really a misunderstanding. Wei Dahai's smile was uglier than crying. At this time, he dared not think of anything but just wanted to go back and not have any ideas about Butterfly Clothing Shop. If he had known that this shop did not belong to Dong Ming's mother, he would not have dared to think about it. Misunderstanding? At this point, how could it be a misunderstanding? Your Excellency, you'd better come with me. I heard that the case of Butterfly Clothing Shop was also related to you. I'd like to find out who in our Ministry of Justice secretly colluded with you to do such a thing. When Shichi's face turned cold and he snorted. Are you going to follow the clues? Wei Dahai felt very guilty. Although he felt that he would not leave any clues, he was afraid. If they really found out that he was involved, it would not be a matter that could be cleared up by saying it was a misunderstanding. Your Excellency, this is really a misunderstanding. Wei Dahai reached out to wipe his cold sweat and cupped one hand in the other before his chest to Wen Shiqi in a humble manner. If this matter was made public, he would definitely be in serious trouble. Your Excellency, this is really a misunderstanding. I thought it was our master who really... Ouyang said with an embarrassed smile. She turned to look at Nanny Dong, bowed sideways, and said, "Sister, I'm really sorry. I really thought it was... I was jealous, so I caused such a big trouble. I'm sorry, sister. Please forgive me." "Madam, you're wrong. My mother only gave birth to me. I don't have any sisters." Nanny Dong looked at Ouyang coldly with sarcasm in her eyes. Ouyang's words almost choked Xiao Wanru. She bit her lip and looked up at Xiao Wanru. "Princess Jin, this marriage was arranged by my father at that time. I didn't know the specific situation. If I had known that my husband was like this at that time, I would not have married him. Well, I made a big mistake, but my husband still insisted on being with shopkeeper Dong." Ouyang's words were sad and extremely innocent. Xiao Wanru interrupted her rudely and said, "Madam Wei, these old things have nothing to do with me, and I don't want to hear them. If there's nothing else, please go back. Don't interfere in the affairs of Butterfly Clothing Shop in the future. If there's anything about Butterfly Clothing Shop again, don't blame me for digging up these old things and arguing in court." Ouyang was stunned for a moment, and then reacted. She took Wei Dahai's hand and said repeatedly, "Yes, yes, we'll leave right away. We won't interfere in the affairs of Butterfly Clothing Shop in the future. We won't do it again." After saying that, she turned around and left with Wei Dahai, who still couldn't react. In the current situation, if Princess Chen really wanted to make trouble, the Wei's mansion would suffer a great disaster. No matter what Princess Chen's purpose was, it was the right thing to let them go and leave as soon as possible. The husband and wife came out of the accounting room in a sorry state. They did not dare to stay any longer and hurriedly left. The people who had originally stayed outside to watch the show saw the husband and wife's dejected appearance and their previous words. They immediately understood that the husband and wife were the ones who were truly guilty. It could be seen that they really plotted against Butterfly Clothing Shop. Many people pointed at their backs and cursed. Chapter 1136. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say, net, "Thank you, Your Excellency." In the account room, Xiao Wanru said, "Thank you, Your Excellency." "Princess Chen, you're too polite." When Shiqi's eyes fell on Xiao Wanru, and his eyes were clear and natural. "May I ask Princess Chen a question?" "Please go ahead, Your Excellency." Xiao Wanru said with a smile. "I want to ask, when Princess Chen first came to the capital and saw me, you seemed to be kind to me. Why did you trust me so much? You even asked me to be your guarantor. Weren't you afraid that I would deceive you?" When they first met in Butterfly Clothing Shop, Xiao Wanru was just an 11-year-old girl who had just arrived in the capital city. Wen Shiqi was not the top scholar at that time, but the third young master of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion. It was certain that they had never met before. "I was young at that time. When I saw you, I thought you were a good person, so I took it for granted and asked you for help. Now I think of it, I was really naive." Xiao Wanru thought for a while and couldn't help laughing. These words were spoken in a somewhat old-fashioned manner. She was not yet of marriageable age. Her pair of charming watery eyes slightly curved, revealing an unscrupulous gentleness. However, it also gave off a faint sense of alienation. She did not appear too close, but also did not make people feel too distant. "Thank you, Your Excellency." Wen Shiqi withdrew his eyes and smiled a little coldly. He stood up and cupped his hands to Xiao Wanru. "I still have something to do in the yamen. Goodbye." Xiao Wanru stood up, bowed sideways with a smile, and said, "Thank you, Your Excellency, for what happened today. Without you, I don't know what would have happened." What happened today was her plan. She wanted to take down Wei Dahai with one blow and cut off Wei Dahai's hope. However, Thanks to Wen Shiqi's proper preparation, Wei Dahai and his wife didn't dare to say anything even if they had other ideas. Even if they were sent to the court, Wei Dahai couldn't win the formal official document, not to mention Nanny Dong, who was on her side. Princess Jin, you're too polite. If Wei Dahai makes trouble again in the future, you can send someone to deal with it. Wen Shiqi said in a businesslike manner and turned to leave. There were many people in Butterfly Clothing Shop, who were all talking about Wei Dahai and his wife and Nanny Dong. Seeing Wen Shiqi come out, someone said in a low voice. Obviously, he recognized Wen Shiqi. She turned to the side and took a few steps to avoid Wen Shiqi. Then she looked at the account room whose door was slightly closed and looked at Wen Shiqi's back with a trace of disapproval in her eyes. Xiao Wanru was indeed a flirt. She not only seduced Chu Luiwei but also got in touch with third young Master Wen. Your Highness, the servant girl called out in a low voice, drawing her gaze back. Her gaze fell on the several bolts of silk in front of her, which she had randomly chosen to avoid being seen and heard by others just now. Xiao Minister Xian Qinchin and Qin. She came late and heard the general meaning, which aroused her curiosity, so she stayed to listen to the gossip. Unexpectedly, she saw Wen Shiqi coming out of Xiao Wanru's room. Wen Shiqi was one of the few noble childs and young talents in the capital city. Infanta Yuan, and also appreciated Wen Shiqi very much. She even thought that if she were to marry, she should marry such a noble child. Of course, it would be best if she could marry a prince. After all, she yearned for the high position of empress in the future. I'll take them all. Infanta Yuan, and said casually. After asking the maid to pay the bill, she left with her maid. Standing at the door and looking out, she didn't see Wen Shiqi. He should have left long ago. A gloomy look flashed across her eyes. Chu Luiwei, Zhang Qilan, and now Wen Shiqi. Your Highness, is it time to go back to the mansion? The maid cautiously reminded her. Infanta left the mansion secretly, and Great Elder Princess didn't know it yet. The wedding day was approaching, and Great Elder Princess didn't want Infanta to go out casually. Let's go. Infanta Yuan nodded and was not in the mood to stroll anymore. After getting in the carriage, she thought for a while and then ordered the maid, go to Prince Zhou's yard outside the city. In the past, Chu Liuzhou had spent a lot of time in the yard outside the city. When she asked before, she knew that Chu Liuzhou had also been in the yard these days. Your Highness, this is not polite. The maid hurriedly advised. Nonsense. Infanta Yuan frowned unhappily and glared at the maid fiercely. The maid was so scared that she hurriedly lowered her head and didn't dare to persuade her anymore. The carriage turned a corner and went out of the city. At a street corner, Wen Shiqi appeared at the intersection with his hands clasped behind his back. He watched the carriage leave from a distance. The mark on the carriage was from Ruiping Great Elder Princess's mansion. Just now, from a distance, it should be Infanta Yuan. When in Butterfly Clothing Shop, Wen Shiqi seemed to see a familiar figure out of the corner of his eye. However, she avoided him quickly, so he didn't find out who it was. If it were in the past, Wen Shiqi would also smile and avoid her, not caring who was paying attention to him. However, now that he was serving in the Ministry of Justice, he naturally became more vigilant and deliberately kept an eye on her. Why did Infanta Yuan avoid him? Shouldn't Infanta Yuan be waiting to get married in the mansion at this time? She didn't wear a veil. Although he didn't see it clearly, she should have recovered from her injury. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her not to wear a veil. Looking at the direction in which the carriage was going, it turned into the central official road and sped up. It seemed that it was going to go out of the city along this official road. What was outside the city? Prince Zhou's yard? This answer naturally appeared in Wen Shiqi's mind. After thinking for a while, he looked at the direction in which the carriage was going and then turned to leave. Xiao Wanru didn't know what was going on outside, nor did she know that Infanta Yuan had a lot of imagination based on some things she saw out of context and even told it to Chu Liuzhou. Your Highness, is it really okay? They won't come again, will they? Madame Dong was still a little worried that Wei Dahai and his wife would not give up. She deeply hated this couple and didn't want to see them again. Wei Dahai doesn't dare to. If they continue to make trouble, They won't be able to get any benefits if they take it to court instead of settling it in private. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and comforted Madame Dong. But, Madame Dong had been very uneasy because of the trouble they made recently, so she always felt uncertain. Don't worry. They won't do it again. This couple is not simple. It's not just a simple money problem. Now their niece's matter is enough to keep them busy. Seeing that Madame Dong was still worried, Xiao Wanru revealed some news. If Commandery Prince Qing wants to marry the princess of the Su Kingdom, he has to let his niece be his concubine. Mo Chiui was also a woman who couldn't be seen through. How could she be simple? That's the best. It's best if they don't come again. Madame Dong made up her mind and said with gritted teeth. Since the princess said so, the princess of the Su Kingdom had just arrived in the capital. It seemed that Wei Dahai and his wife couldn't spare any attention to deal with her. When will the princess transfer the ownership of Butterfly Clothing Shop to you? In a few days, I'll ask Yu Jie to come over and take you to the Ministry of Justice to close the case. After that, everything will be done properly. Xiao Wanru said. When she wrote to Wenshichi before, she asked him to help her investigate the matter of the shop assistant involved in the case. Since Wenshichi mentioned it just now, it could be seen that it was not a big problem. Yes, I'll wait for Miss Yu Jie. Madame Dong nodded. The ownership of Butterfly Clothing Shop had been settled, so she breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, it was just a matter of transfer of ownership. Everything else could be done as usual. For Madame Dong, it was best to have one less reason for Wei Dahai to look for her. This matter was finally settled. Xiao Wanru asked about the situation of the shop again before leaving with her people. She had to ask Chu Luchen to send someone to investigate Wei Dahai. Was he so short of money? He even didn't hesitate to go against her, Prince Chen's wife. There should be other mysteries behind it. Wei Dahai and his wife returned to the mansion dejectedly. Both of them looked embarrassed. After asking everyone to leave, they looked at each other speechlessly. What should we do now? Wei Dahai touched his head and said in distress. He did need money, a large sum of money, which was supposed to be made up by Butterfly Clothing Shop. Did Commandery Prince Qing say anything? Madame Ouyang frowned tightly and asked after thinking for a while with a dark face, does he really intend to let Qiu Yi be his concubine? That's what Commandery Prince Qing meant. The one from Su country must also have a much higher bloodline than Qiu Yi. Wei Dahai said vaguely. What do you mean by much higher? Actually, it's about the same. Both of them have the bloodline of the princess, so how can it be much higher? Strictly speaking, Qiu Yi's bloodline is closer, so her bloodline is higher. It's just that she saw that the one in the Su Kingdom has a higher status, so she decided to change her mind. What did you tell us before? Madame Ouyang slammed her hand on the table and scolded angrily, what an ungrateful thing. Don't you think about who saved him? How dare you break off the engagement now? Wei Dahai fell silent and said after a long while, what's the use of being angry at this time? We can't really let him ruin the engagement with Qiu Yi. Why don't you go to Commandery Prince Qing's old princess and tell her that we spent so much effort to save them, but now we can't even give them a position at this time. What do you mean? It's all your fault. You should have let Qiu Yi marry Prince Qing earlier, but you said that you would delay it and not take Prince Chen's place. Now you've given them a reason to break off the engagement. Madame Ouyang said angrily. Don't worry. If Commandery Prince Qing wants to get married, he has to rely on us. Now it's the best way to prove our strength. It's just that we'll lose a sum of money. Wei Dahai said. Let's sell those pieces of land first, and then go to Commandery Prince Qing's mansion. I'll talk to their old princess about it. Madame Ouyang said angrily. Now they could only tear down the east wall to mend the west wall. That's it for now. Madam, please go to Commandery Prince Qing's mansion. Wei Dahai said helplessly. He didn't have any ideas about Butterfly Clothing Shop, and he didn't dare to have any more ideas. Princess Chen had almost all the evidence. If he rushed forward, he would be courting death. Wei Dahai's forbearance was the reason why he could live peacefully until now without any serious problems. Chapter 1137. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say, net wonderful pop-up window free reading. When Xiao Wanru returned to the mansion, she went directly to the study. Chu Liuchen's study was in the attic where he lived before. It was obviously a 3-story attic, but from the outside, it only had 2 floors. Hearing that she came over, Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly took her to the 2nd floor and then left. Xiao Wanru left Yujie outside the door of the 2nd floor and went up the stairs. Chu Liuchen was leaning on a wide chair and reading official documents. The sunlight outside the window fell on him, making his handsome face look like pearls and jade. He raised his beautiful eyes and saw Xiao Wanru. He waved to her and asked her to come over. Xiao Wanru came over. Before she said anything, she was pulled to sit down by the chair. Chu Liuchen put his hand down and held her slender waist. He leaned over as if he had no bones and asked lazily, "How's it going?" Xiao Wanru couldn't move for a while. Xiao Wanru felt that she couldn't compete with Chu Liuchen in terms of strength, so she stopped struggling and said helplessly, "It's been dealt with. In a few days, ask Yujie to go to the yamen and transfer the butterfly clothing shop back." Xiao Wanru had already told Chu Liuchen about the butterfly clothing shop. Nothing wrong. Chu Liuchen raised his eyebrows and looked at Xiao Wanru with a somewhat enchanting smile and glittering eyes. "Nothing. I just feel that Wei Dahai and his wife are very short of money." Xiao Wanru said the doubts in her heart. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, and she hesitated a little. She turned her head to look at Chu Liuchen and asked, "Do you feel that Wei Dahai is unusual?" "It's more than unusual. It's very unusual," Chu Liuchen said with a smile and threw the booklet in his hand on the desk. The desk was full of booklets. When Xiao Wanru came to see it before, there were not so many booklets. The emperor had really sent a lot of memorials to him. "I heard that although Wei Dahai also has concubines, his backyard is relatively clean on the whole, and there are not so many people to support. Nanny Wei only has 1 nephew, so she must have given him a lot of money. Why does he seem to be crazy about money?" Xiao Wanru said in confusion. Mammy Wei was the most useful person in front of the Empress Dowager, but she could still stay by the Empress Dowager's side. She must have a lot of money in her hands, and she only had Wei Dahai as a junior. It was not easy to find him. It could be seen that she really loved him. How could she not give him money? There weren't many people in the Wei residence that needed to be fed. Was Wei Dahai so poor that he dared to go against her, Princess Qin? If he wasn't so short of money, he wouldn't have done such a thing. Wei Dahai was born in a poor family. Later, he married the miss of Ouyang's mansion. His father-in-law was also a moderate official, and he used to have a good reputation among the officials. But apart from that, he had nothing else. Under the leadership of his father-in-law, he also started as a minor official and then became an official of moderate rank. If it weren't for Nanny Wei, he wouldn't even have any real power. Chu Liuchen said indifferently, narrowed his eyes, and said with deep eyes, "But such a minor official, although he didn't make much progress, he wouldn't make mistakes. He had been an official for so many years and never stood out. If his niece hadn't been the future princess of Commandery Prince Qing, I wouldn't have paid attention to him until now." Because of his moderate rank and his temper, he almost neglected Wei Dahai. If his niece was the future princess of Commandery Prince Qing, Chu Liuchen's attention would be attracted by Chu Liuchen's attention. Chu Liuchen's attention had been attracted by Xiao Wanru's matter. Now he was really interested in her. If she didn't pay attention to it, she wouldn't know it. Now that she paid attention to it, she found that she almost missed such a big fish. Xiao Wanru didn't want to pay too much attention to Chu Liuchen. Since Chu Liuchen had already known something suspicious about Wei Dahai, she didn't need to worry about it next. "I'm going to Marquis Xing's mansion," Xiao Wanru said softly. "What for?" Chu Liuchen said indifferently. "Old Madam is back. As her granddaughter, I have to go to see her, lest she sends someone over, which will make me seem too pretentious." Xiao Wanru said. Qing told her that Old Madam would return to the mansion in the afternoon. With Old Madam's character, if she didn't go, there would definitely be some trouble. It doesn't matter if she goes back. It's all thanks to you that she can come back safely this time. What else can she be dissatisfied with? Chu Luchen said unhappily. He really didn't like the people or things in Marquis Xing's mansion. If you go there, you will also be wronged. If it was possible, he would like to get rid of Marquis Xing's mansion directly, lest Xiao Wanru would always be implicated because of the affairs of Marquis Xing's mansion. No matter what, she is my elder. It's unreasonable if I don't go there. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said, with you there, I won't suffer any losses. She understood what Chu Luchen meant. The smile at the corners of her mouth was faint and gentle. She was less indifferent and her eyes were as clear as autumn water. Chu Luchen snorted coldly and said, since you're going there, you don't need to leave a meal. I'll go and come back early, but I should leave a meal for you. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and said, just tell her that I'm waiting for you to have a meal. Chu Luchen reached out and held one of her slender hands. His hands were warm. I'll go and come back soon. Don't worry. Nothing will happen. Marquis Xing's mansion is not the old Duke Xing's mansion now. At this time, old madam won't want to offend me. Xiao Wanru gently pinched Chu Liuchen's hand with the back of her hand. Her eyes blinked twice and the corners of her mouth curled up. My second uncle is going to marry a concubine. The first thing old madam will do after entering the mansion should be to deal with this matter. Xiao Wanru said, I also want to find out about the girl named Anyang. Grandma said that there was such a servant girl around my mother, but she didn't marry with my mother at that time. She seems to be from Marquis Xing's mansion. When a woman married into her husband's family, the closest servant girl was usually the servant girl who came with her when she was married. Compared with these servant girls in her husband's family, these servant girls were likely to grow up with her and knew her living habits very well. Of course, it was better to use a familiar servant girl than a servant girl who knew nothing about her. But this Anyang seemed to be the principal servant girl of her mother at that time. Her grandma said that the 4 servant girls who came with her at that time were all the principal servant girls of her mother. They grew up with her mother and were very loyal to her mother. However, these people all got into trouble, but the servant girl prepared by Marquis Xing's mansion was not in trouble. Her grandma didn't pay attention to the servant girl before, but when her mother got into trouble, only she and her mother returned. As for the details, Marquis Xing's mansion didn't let her know. As for later, when her mother got into trouble, her grandma would not pay attention to an unfamiliar servant girl. If it weren't for what happened at present, no one would have thought that this servant girl would climb into Xiao Jing's bed and give birth to a daughter who didn't exist in the last life. Xiao Wanru was really curious about this. Xiao Jing didn't have this concubine in the last life, but now he had such a servant girl. Could it be that her rebirth changed a lot of things? But when she was reborn, if this illegitimate daughter wanted to give birth, she should have already been born. From this point of view, it had nothing to do with her rebirth. Hesitating in her heart, she frowned slightly, leaned back, and leaned into the reassuring arms with a faint smell of medicine. Compared with the smell of medicine on Chu Liuchen's body in the past, it inexplicably made Xiao Wanru feel at ease both in the past and now. She closed her eyes and said softly, I always feel that this girl named Anyang is not simple. Since she is not simple, just get rid of her directly. Chu Liuchen's approach had always been simple and rough. He took Xiao Wanru's delicate body into his arms and said lightly, she was just a servant girl. He had 100 ways to kill her. Even if she was not just a servant girl on the surface, so what? Don't do it. I'll deal with this kind of thing. Xiao Wanru was shocked and hurriedly reached out to hold Chu Liuchen's hand, as if Chu Luchen would really do it at this time. She is related to my mother's affairs. I still want to find some clues from her in the past. It was not easy for her to find such a person. She did not want this girl named Anyang to slip away. Such a person must know something. Even if she was devoted to Xiao Jing, she had to find out something suspicious from other aspects. Well, it's up to you, Chu Luchen said dotingly, and the gentleness in his eyes diluted the hostility on his face. Xiao Wanru suddenly opened her watery eyes and said with a sweet smile, then I'd better leave immediately and go to Marquis Xing's mansion early to wait. I can also check something. Old Madam came back in the afternoon. She went back at this time. It was a little early, so she could be busy with her own affairs. Maybe Anyang would bump into her, How could she be reconciled to the fact that she did not let Anyang benefit from the previous plan? No matter who was behind it, there must be a plan. She had sent herself to the door. Seeing the cunning in her eyes, Chu Luchan nodded helplessly and said, "You can go now, but you can't stay for dinner at night. Just say that I said it." "Okay, I'll be back." Xiao Wanru nodded and agreed obediently. Looking at her gentle and beautiful look, Chu Luchan smiled and said in an extremely serious tone, "Don't tell me that I won't stay for dinner." "I won't stay for dinner." "They can't stay for dinner no matter what," Xiao Wanru said and looked at the handsome man in front of her. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, revealing the clear figure in her eyes. Looking at him like this, the uncomfortable depression in the bottom of her heart also faded a little. Will concubine Lan be made a high ranking? The words rushed out of her mouth, and when she finished speaking, her watery eyes wandered around uneasily. In fact, she really didn't want to know about this kind of thing. When he wanted to say it, he would naturally say it. She wouldn't force him. He won't. This position is very good. Since he has become an, why does he need to fight for a high position? So what if he has a high position? Isn't it good now? Isn't she pursuing this kind of position that is neither high nor low? Chu Luchan said with his deep eyes. He did not say it too clearly, nor did he avoid it. But even so, Xiao Wanru felt inexplicably distressed. She turned sideways, hugged Chu Luchan, buried her head in his arms, and said something irrelevant. "You still have me." Chapter 1138. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say, net. No matter what, you still have me. No matter what, you still have me. Chu Liuchen's eyes became softer. He reached out to hold Xiao Wanru in his arms and looked down at the girl in his arms. Because of what she said, her delicate face turned pink. Even if she buried her head in his arms, he could still see the blush on her face. She looked very peaceful and happy, and even a little excited. No matter what, she was here. With her, he would have everything. "Don't worry, I won't be sad." The same inexplicable words made Xiao Wanru raise her head slightly and steal a glance at Chu Luchan. Seeing the tenderness in his eyes, she immediately lowered her head again. The two of them stopped talking and just enjoyed each other's warmth. There was no need to say anything more. Just leaning on each other like this had already shown their feelings. After coming out of Chu Liuchen's study, Xiao Wanru went straight outside and got in the carriage. This time, she took Qing and Yu Jie with her, which was requested by Chu Luchan. Xiao Wanru's current identity was different, so it didn't matter if she took more people. The carriage went all the way to Marquis Xing's mansion. After getting the news, Zhao Xiran came out early and waited at the place where the carriage stopped. Yu Jie and Qing helped Xiao Wanru get out of the carriage. "Princess Chen." Zhao Xiran bowed and stepped aside. Unexpectedly, she saw second Miss Zhao Shiqiong there. It seemed that since she saw second Miss Zhao last time, second Miss Zhao had appeared in front of her from time to time. Zhao Shiqiong also bowed to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru said with a smile, "First sister-in-law, I'll go to see third aunt first. Third aunt asked me to see her when I come back." "Princess Chen, you go first. I'll go to prepare lunch first." Looking at the sky, Zhao Xiran said sensibly. Xiao Wanru came at this time to wait for old madam to come back in the afternoon, so she naturally had to have lunch in the mansion. "Thank you, first sister-in-law." Xiao Wanru narrowed her eyes slightly, and a faint trace of serenity flashed across her eyes. "Then I'll go to see third aunt first." "Help yourself, Princess Chen." Zhao Xiran stepped aside and asked Xiao Wanru to take 2 servant girls with her. Another servant girl went to report to the third branch. "Big sister, why don't you let me take Princess Chen there?" After Xiao Wanru walked away, Zhao Shiqiong said unwillingly. She had just hinted to her sister that she would take Xiao Wanru to the third branch. "What are you doing there?" Wasn't Xiao Zaihuan's words clear enough that day? Zhao Xiran's face darkened and he said unhappily. "So what? Father has agreed with me. It doesn't matter to them. They are just jealous." Zhao Shiqiong said indifferently. After she went back that day, she implicitly expressed it to her father, and her father did not object. He also told her that the current Prince Chen was not the Prince Chen of the past, and asked her to be careful not to provoke Prince Chen's anger. He also warned her that she could not provoke Princess Chen. This Princess Chen was the person Prince Chen liked, so she was different in Prince Chen's heart. It was also for this reason that Zhao Shiqiong specially came to Marquis Xing's mansion. Today, old Madam of Marquis Xing's mansion returned, and Princess Chen should also come over. She wanted to build a relationship with Princess Chen first and make Princess Chen not hate her. It would be better if she could please Princess Chen. She said that she had to bring it up, and Princess Chen would take the initiative to bring it up. With this mentality, Zhao Shiqiong, of course, wholeheartedly wanted to please Xiao Wanru, but her sister dispelled the idea. She was really unhappy. This is Marquis Xing's mansion, not our minister's mansion. You are a guest, but Princess Chen is the host. She, the host, needs you, a guest, to lead the way? Third aunt won't like you either. She asked Xiao Ehuan to invite Princess Chen there, so there must be something. Why do you, an outsider, follow her? Zhao Shiran said unhappily. He was really unhappy with his father's decision. His father used to do things very clearly, but why did he think more and more crooked now? How could he know that Prince Chen would let his sister marry into Prince Chen's mansion? Why did he think that Princess Chen would swallow her anger and take the initiative to marry a concubine for Prince Chen? When she married into Prince Chen's mansion, Xiao Wanru had not been married yet. They had been together for a period of time. Although they were not intimate, Zhao Shiran did not dare to look down on Princess Chen. When she married into Prince Chen's mansion, she almost had no chance to turn things around because of a little negligence. How could such a person be an ordinary woman? Her father took it for granted, and her second sister was also self-righteous. She wanted to persuade them, but no matter what she said, no one paid attention to her. Looking at Zhao Shiqiong, who had a longing face, Zhao Shiran was really helpless. In her opinion, it would not happen at all. If Prince Chen liked someone, how could he not even find a concubine after so many years? Prince Chen was favored by the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. If he really liked someone, as long as he asked, even Infanta Yuan, and would have to marry her. Even if he was a sick child and could not live long, so what? Zhao Shiran didn't know where she got the feeling that her sister-in-law had been favored by Prince Chen long ago. There was no evidence, just a woman's intuition. However, there was no evidence to prove this intuition, so her sister would not believe it. Thinking of this, Zhao Shiran sighed helplessly again, reached out to take her sister's hand, and said, "Let's go back first and prepare a satisfactory lunch for Princess Chen, which will also make her happy. Third aunt is not in good health, so she will not keep Princess Chen for long." Hearing Zhao Shiran's words, Zhao Shiqiong also felt that it was reasonable, so she reluctantly followed Zhao Shiran back. When Xiao Wanru came back from the third branch of Marquis Xing's mansion, she would go to please Princess Chen. She believed that Princess Chen did not want an obedient concubine. Moreover, she was of noble status, so she volunteered to be a concubine. Princess Chen would not be dissatisfied with her. Xiao Wanru did not know that second Miss Xiao wanted to please her so that she would agree to marry her as a concubine. She took Yu Jie and Qing all the way to the third branch. When they arrived at the third madam's courtyard, someone had already reported to her, and Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Kailing came out to welcome them. When they saw her, they were about to salute. Xiao Wanru smiled and asked them not to do so, and then they entered the main room together. The smell of medicine in the main room was very strong. The third madam was in poor health, so she took medicine almost all the year round. Even though the window was open at this time and some of the smell of medicine came out, the smell of medicine was still very clear. Xiao Wanru followed Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Caihuan into the inner room. When she saw the third madam lying on the bed, who was so thin that she almost had bones left, she couldn't help but be stunned. Was the third madam so seriously ill? The third madam was very thin, but it could be seen that she was calm. When she saw Xiao Wanru coming over, she struggled to get up. Xiao Wanru hurriedly stepped forward, held her down, and then sat down on the chair beside the bed. "Why is the third aunt so ill? What did the doctor say?" After sitting down, Xiao Wanru asked in surprise. She really did not expect that the third madam would be so ill. When Xiao Zhehuan came to talk to her before, she did not mention that the third madam was so ill. Although the third madam was often in poor health, she did not look so sick that she could not get out of bed. "I'm fine. I just caught a cold and am not in good health. I will be fine after a little rest," the third madam said indifferently. Her eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's face and she said with a smile, "Has the third aunt invited an imperial physician to see her?" Xiao Wanru asked with a frown. "Not everyone can invite an imperial physician in the palace." The third madam shook her head. "Didn't third uncle tell second uncle about it?" Xiao Wanru asked in confusion. Although the third branch could not directly invite an imperial physician, Xiao Jing could. "Your second uncle has been very busy recently and is hardly in the mansion. I don't have anything important to do, so I won't disturb him." The third madam shook her head. Xiao Jing was hardly in the mansion? Had he been staying with Yang all the time? He didn't even live in the mansion. It could be seen that Yang was a powerful person. Even so, we still have to invite an imperial physician to see her, Xiao Wanru said unhappily. She turned to Xiao Zhehuan beside her and said, "Send someone to invite an imperial physician with my name card. Third aunt is so ill that we have to let the imperial physician see her." Xiao Zhehuan's eyes turned red. She wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief and nodded. The mansion was in a mess. No one cared about her mother's illness. She had told her father, but her father didn't care very much. He only said that he would talk to second uncle, but there had been no news. She wanted to go to second uncle, but she hadn't found him. Every time she went there, she couldn't find him. It was just a minor illness, but now her mother was so ill. Xiao Zhehuan was full of anxiety. That day, her mother asked her to go to Prince Chen's mansion to see Princess Chen. Xiao Zhehuan actually wanted to talk about it, but later she thought that she would talk about it when Xiao Wanru returned to the mansion. She didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would take the initiative to say so as soon as she came back. With tears in her eyes, she lowered her head and followed Yu Jie out in silence. She took the name card handed by Yu Jie and asked someone to invite an imperial physician over. In the room, the third madam's eyes were also slightly red. She sighed softly and said to Xiao Kaling, who was standing aside and wiping her tears, "You can leave first and stay outside with your sister for a while. I have something to say to Princess Chen." Xiao Kaling turned around while crying. When she got to the door and saw Xiao Zhehuan standing outside, she suddenly felt sad. She threw herself into Xiao Zhehuan's arms and cried in a low voice. "Mother will be fine. She will be fine." Xiao Zhehuan comforted her in a low voice, but no one knew whether she was comforting Xiao Kaling or Xiao Zhehuan. The injuries on her face had basically healed, and the few scars were almost invisible. But if one looked closely, there were still some. Fortunately, the makeup she used was good, and some small flaws were almost invisible. But even so, Xiao Zhehuan still felt very inferior and almost didn't go out. She was afraid that something would really happen to her mother. She looked up at the door and held back the tears in her eyes. Her mother told her not to be willful anymore. Even if something really happened, her mother would find a way to protect them and never let them be schemed against. The room became quiet. The third madam wiped away the tears in the corner of her eyes and sat up slightly. "Does Princess Chen think it's incredible that I'm so sick and weak, that I'm so ill in such a short time?" Chapter 1139. Third aunt, although you used to be in poor health, you just caught a cold now. Why did you suddenly become like this? Xiao Wanru looked at the third madam from head to toe and said. She was indeed very surprised. Although the third madam had always been in poor health, she was just in poor health. Why did she become so ill now? It seemed that she was so ill that she couldn't be cured. Even without feeling the third madam's pulse, Xiao Wanru could see that the third madam was in a bad condition. She couldn't help frowning slightly and had an idea in her mind. My body is in poor health, so I can't bear a little illness. The third madam looked at Xiao Wanru and said seriously, "Is it the medicine to improve your spirit that you used before?" Xiao Wanru asked tentatively. "It should be. Although I don't know why, it should have something to do with the medicine that Dr. Chiu gave me before," the third madam said. Is there any powder left? Xiao Wanru blinked and asked. No. The third madam shook her head and said with a wry smile, at that time, I took Dr. Chiu's medicine, which was excellent. My poor health improved a lot. At that time, I even had the spirit to deal with the affairs of the mansion. I even felt that I would recover soon. But recently I felt that I was not good. It's like pulling silk to get rid of a disease. A small problem can become a big problem. Xiao Wanru was silent for a moment. She knew what the third madam meant. It was good when she took the medicine before, so she didn't deliberately leave anything like powder. Now she could only rely on her feeling. She didn't even leave the prescription. Where's the prescription? There's no prescription. Dr. Chiu gave me the medicine directly. Sure enough, the third madam's answer was exactly the same as she had guessed. Third aunt, don't worry. Maybe you'll recover after the Imperial physician has seen you. After all, you just feel a little unwell. It's just a cold. Xiao Wanru could only comfort the third madam now. I know what's wrong with my family. Even if I'm afraid there's nothing I can do. It's my fault for believing that Dr. Chiu, whom the second branch found, was a good doctor. I thought that he was quite capable as a doctor. I didn't expect that he had drained all his energy. Now he's like this. The third madam coughed in a low voice and showed a sad smile on her face. Seeing that Xiao Wanru still wanted to comfort her, she shook her head and said, Princess Qin, I invited you here today not to talk about my illness. In fact, this illness is nothing to me. Maybe it is a relief. But the poor two children, Sai Huan and Kaling, have lost their mother at this age. I really can't rest assured. Third aunt, the Imperial physician always has a way. That was all Xiao Wanru could do now. Chen Wangfei, I beg you for one thing. I only beg you for one thing. Can you help me take care of these sisters? I don't ask for them to marry into a wealthy family. I just want them to marry someone who is truly good to them. Third madam said bitterly. Third aunt, I can't interfere in the marriage of third sister and fourth sister. Old madam has her own arrangement. It's not something that I, a junior, can interfere in. Xiao Wanru reminded third madam. She really didn't want to accept this matter. Not only did she not have a legitimate status, but she also let others criticize Prince Chen's mansion. Others would only say that she was rude and unreasonable and used Prince Chen's mansion to suppress her sisters. No one would say that she sincerely helped this pair of sisters. Chen Wangfei. Third madam suddenly opened her eyes wide and straightened her body. She wanted to get up and bow to Xiao Wanru, but her body went soft and she almost fell. Xiao Wanru got up, walked to the bed, and helped third madam lie down slowly. Although third madam lay down weakly, she held Xiao Wanru's hand tightly and said, Chen Wangfei, please help me. Third aunt, I really can't help you. My intervention in this matter is not as good as yours. Third aunt, your health is not so bad. Although you can't be as good as before after taking good care of yourself, it is not completely impossible. Xiao Wanru said softly, but her words were very firm. The affairs of Marquis Xing's mansion were in a mess, so she couldn't interfere at this time. Are you really so cruel? They are your cousins. Third madam looked at Xiao Wanru with tears in her eyes and said reproachfully, I beg you to save them, but you don't want to? Third aunt, it's not that I don't want to save them. On the one hand, they don't need me to save them. They are the misses of Marquis Xing's mansion. Their marriage will be decided by the elders. Even if old madam doesn't make the decision, there are still second uncle and third uncle. It's not up to me, a younger sister, to decide. Third aunt, do you think old madam will give this right to me? Or do you think I can argue with old madam? Seeing that third madam opened her mouth and wanted to speak, Xiao Wanru interrupted her rudely. Third aunt, you may think that since I am Princess Qin now, I can do some willful things and forcibly interfere in the affairs of Marquis Xing's mansion. Even if old madam is not satisfied, she won't do anything to me. But, third aunt, think about it. If something happens to you, the two sisters have to observe mourning first. After 3 years of mourning, third sister and fourth sister are old. Even if old madam and second uncle don't intend to do anything to them, it will be difficult for them to find a marriage. What's more, do you think old madam will let their marriage go? Old madam had always been calculating. It was not a big deal to sacrifice 1 or 2 granddaughters for the benefit of the mansion. Old madam could do this kind of thing. It was not easy to get married, and old madam was scheming behind. It could be imagined that Xiao Zaihuan and Xiao Keiling's marriage was definitely not optimistic. These words were not pleasant to hear, but fell into the depths of third madam's heart and hit the softest part of her heart heavily. Xiao Wanru knew old madam's character, and so did she. If it really came to that point, the tragic situation of her 2 daughters could be imagined. Third madam didn't know where she got the strength, but she held Xiao Wanru's hand tightly. Her eyes were burning. She said in a low voice, but every word was heard by her, "What if our third branch is separated from Marquis Xing's mansion?" "Third aunt, you want to separate?" Xiao Wanru was surprised. The third branch of Marquis Xing's mansion had always been attached to the second branch. No matter before or now, it was the second branch who supported Marquis Xing's mansion. If third madam wanted to separate, it was not easy to do so. At least she had to get the consent of her third uncle. Third uncle had always been obedient to old madam and didn't spend much time in the mansion. It seemed that he was not close to third madam. Seeing that he didn't care about third madam's illness, Xiao Wanru knew that third uncle didn't care about third madam. Would he listen to third madam and separate? If third madam really separated, it would definitely not be a good thing for the third branch. He will get what he wants regardless of whether he wants to or not. Third madam gritted her teeth and said with a sharp look. She relaxed her hand slightly but still held Xiao Wanru's hand. "Princess Qin, although I don't know what happened to your mother and father at that time, I know that your mother's condition was abnormal. Her death is very suspicious." "My mother, she was killed?" Xiao Wanru's voice trembled involuntarily. She held third madam's hand and pursed her lips tightly. "In fact, I don't know. I only remember that it was very strange." Infanta Qinghua's mind was a little unclear. After giving birth to Yuanhao, she had been in a daze. She said your nickname and sometimes your name. Her mental state was very bad, but it was impossible for her to go out. Moreover, she fell into the lotus pond and drowned alone. Third madam said, "Didn't they say that my mother missed my father after giving birth, so she died of depression?" Xiao Wanru's voice trembled, and her fingers twitched involuntarily as if something had hit her heart hard. It was so painful that she could hardly breathe and felt a burning pain in her heart. This was originally said to the outside. They were afraid that the outside would investigate, and they were also afraid that your grandmother would come to find them. In this case, your grandmother naturally didn't know. As soon as your grandmother heard that something happened to your mother, she only came to take a look. She didn't even see your mother's face before she fainted. After that, she fell ill and couldn't sleep. The funeral was also hastily arranged by the mansion. Third madam said. Xiao Wanru's face was as pale as snow without a trace of blood. She pursed her lips tightly and looked at third madam motionlessly. She knew that third madam must have something else to say. Sure enough, third madam paused and said, "At that time I just felt suspicious, but I didn't dare to say anything. You know that the second branch has always been in charge of our mansion. I was in poor health and didn't win the favor of old madam and your third uncle. I gave birth to 2 daughters, so I was only the third madam in the mansion. Few people took me seriously. Moreover, there was no evidence. Even if I wanted to say something, I couldn't do anything. Not only was it ineffective, but it might also cause a big trouble." Third madam turned her head and coughed twice before turning back again. "I have been hiding this in my heart for so many years and haven't said anything about it for so many years. At that time, your third sister had an accident in the palace and her face was almost ruined. I quarreled with your third uncle and asked him to find your second uncle to find a good marriage for your third sister. After that, I talked about this suspicion. Your third uncle went to find your second uncle later. Later, there was the matter that Xiao Zhihe wanted to give up her marriage to your third sister." Xiao Wanru's hands trembled and her long eyelashes drooped. She knew about this matter. At that time, she was still wondering if third uncle knew some secrets, such as the matter that Xiao Jing had killed her father. Unexpectedly, it was not her father but her mother. The third branch threatened the second branch with her mother's matter and asked Xiao Jie to give up her marriage. She raised the corners of her mouth silently, but couldn't squeeze out a smile. Her lowered eyes were cold and gloomy. Her father and mother were used by these so-called relatives, and even their value after death was used. Marquis Xing's mansion was really heartless and outrageous. I know. We are all so sorry for this matter. At this time, it can be regarded as my retribution for keeping what happened at that time a secret. Since I ask you to stand up for Huan and Ling, I have to show you my sincerity anyway. In a few days, I will ask the third branch to leave Marquis Xing's mansion and reveal the fact that your mother died mysteriously at that time. Third Madam said with a wry smile and raised her eyes to look at Xiao Wanru earnestly. I am also a dying person. It doesn't matter what happens to me. It's best if I can survive, but it doesn't matter if I can't, as long as Huan and Ling live well. Chapter 1140. Chanxian. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translation. Xiao Wanru slowly clenched her fists after loosening them. She tried hard to suppress the emotions surging in her heart like uncontrollable flames, but she couldn't suppress the flames no matter how hard she tried. She had a feeling that she wanted to destroy everything and Marquis Xing's mansion. This place was full of an aura that she hated. Even if she just smelled it, she would feel like vomiting. Thinking of this, he felt the same way in his heart. He took a heavy step back and suddenly turned sideways, clutching his chest and vomiting. She didn't eat much in the morning, and it was almost lunchtime. When she was in Butterfly Clothing Shop, she only vomited some water. But even so, she still tried hard to vomit. Princess! Yujie and Qing Er's faces changed dramatically, and they hurried over to help Xiao Wanru. The third madam struggled to stand up and looked at Xiao Wanru anxiously. Hearing the sound inside, Xiao Zihuan and Xiao Kaling hurriedly pushed the door open and came in. Seeing that Xiao Wanru vomited all the water and her face was pale with an abnormal redness, they were so scared that they hurried to the third madam. Go and see your fifth sister. The third madam waved her hand and said. Xiao Zihuan took 2 steps forward and reached out to help Xiao Wanru. However, Qing stared at her vigilantly, so she didn't dare to touch Xiao Wanru for a while. She could only ask nervously, Fifth sister, what's wrong with you? Do you feel uncomfortable? Let's go back. Xiao Wanru covered her mouth with a handkerchief and said in a trembling voice. At this time, she was so fragile that she couldn't even stand steadily. Her mind was in a mess, and she just instinctively wanted to find a safe harbor so that she could get a moment of peace. She had to go home. She had to go home. The more she knew about what had happened in the past, the more unbearable she was. In fact, too many reasons couldn't explain her concealment at that time. She didn't need evidence. She just needed a kind reminder. She didn't remind her at that time because there was no benefit. She told Xiao Jing before because there was benefit. Yu Jie and Qing responded and supported her to go out. The third madam, who was lying on the bed, suddenly pushed away Xiao Kaling's hand, sat up, and said in a shrill voice, Fifth madam, I will use the third branch as a prelude to reopen what happened in the past. No matter what, the third branch will leave Marquis Xing's mansion and reopen what happened in the past. By the time she finished speaking, Xiao Wanru had left with the help of the servant girl. The third madam collapsed weakly. Xiao Kaling hurriedly hugged her and cried anxiously, Mother, mother! Xiao Zihuan couldn't care less about Xiao Wanru and turned to the bed to check on the third madam. The third madam took a few deep breaths. When she regained some strength, she held her 2 daughters' hands and said, I'm fine. It's just that I used too much force just now. If I'm not here in the future, you should spend more time with your fifth sister. Although she is scheming, she is still young and her heart is not cold. Even if she takes it out on you, you have always been good to her. She will get over it. Mother, did something happen? Xiao Zihuan said anxiously. Xiao Wanru's reaction just now was too frightening. She didn't know what her mother had said to her. As for the last few words her mother had shouted just now, she didn't understand. What did separation mean? Why would the third branch take the initiative to ask for separation? She even talked about the things that happened in the past. What happened in the past? The more Xiao Taihuan thought about it, the more flustered she became, and her eyes turned red. If she had known earlier, she would have listened to them secretly just now, so that she wouldn't have said anything now. She didn't know, so she was flustered. You don't need to know the details. You should listen to your mother. No matter what, you should treat your fifth sister as a sister. Even if something happened to me, it was because of the second branch. It was the second branch who invited Dr. Chiu to treat me. Not only the second branch, but also your grandmother. I don't believe that she really doesn't know anything. She doesn't know that Dr. Chiu's medical skills are poisonous. He doesn't treat people but drains their energy and spirit, the third madam said with difficulty, and a trace of hatred flashed across her eyes. How could she not hate it? It was the old woman and the second branch who caused her to be in such a state. The imperial physician came quickly. Hearing that Princess Qin invited him, he came immediately without delay. After checking the third madam's condition, he shook his head. Imperial physician, how is my mother? Xiao Kaling asked. She was younger and less scheming. Seeing that her mother's face was pale and dark, she had already panicked and didn't pay attention to the meaning of her sister and mother's words. She just looked at the imperial physician anxiously and was in a panic. The imperial physician shook his head again, looked at the two sisters, and then looked at the third madam lying on the bed. Madam has been suffering from physical deficiency for a long time. This time, the illness is very serious. I'm afraid that you have to take good care of yourself to recover. His words were very implicit. The third madam's hand twitched, and then she slowly opened it with a wry smile on her face. At least she wouldn't die immediately. There was still some time at present. She could still do something to make up for it, which could be regarded as a good karma for her daughter. The imperial physician went aside to prescribe medicine. Hearing that their mother was already at the end of her life and could only hold on for a few months at most, the two sisters cried uncontrollably. Later, Xiao Kaling asked Xiao Kaling to wipe away her tears, force a smile, and return to the main room. She asked the servant girl to boil the medicine while helping the third madam lie down. The third madam asked the servant girls to leave, leaving only the mother and daughter in the room. She sighed, looked at Xiao Taihuan, and said with a slightly serious face, "Here, I want to separate from the mansion. If I take you away, you will no longer be the Mrs. of Marquis Xing's mansion. I wonder if you will resent me?" Although Marquis Xing's mansion had declined, it was still a noble family. If the third madam was separated from Marquis Xing's mansion, she would only be an ordinary miss, which was completely different from the Mrs. of Marquis Xing's mansion. Their status would be degraded, and it would be more difficult for them to choose a marriage. "Mother, you can do whatever you want." Xiao Taihuan had already faintly sensed something and said after thinking for a while. Xiao Kaling was a little confused. She looked at her mother and then at her sister. Thinking of her mother's health, her eyes turned red again, and she wiped her tears with a handkerchief. "I'm afraid that Marquis Xing's mansion will be destroyed," the third madam murmured. Xiao Taihuan's heart skipped a beat and her face changed slightly. "Mother, there must be an inside story behind Infanta Qinghua's death. Your father just mentioned it to your second uncle, and your second uncle immediately gave in. He also gave up Xiao Jie's marriage and was willing to let you enter Commandery Prince Qing's mansion as a concubine. At that time, I was also delusional, so that you fell into such a position. If at that time, directly told the head of the 5 maids, she would definitely give you a hand at this time." The third madam was very regretful. Even if she couldn't tell Ru and great elder princess more than a decade ago, she should have hinted it to Xiao Wanru before. It was too late to say it now, but she hated the second madam. She hated old madam and wanted to protect her 2 daughters. She could only ask for Xiao Wanru's forgiveness and Xiao Wanru's protection of her daughters in this way. "Huan, Ling, remember, no matter what happens, you are not allowed to resent Princess Qin. We owe her this." The third madam looked at her two daughters, stretched out her slightly cold hands, held one in each hand, and repeated it again. With resentment on her thin face, she stared at a place in the air and said, "It's all the fault of the second madam. It's all the fault of madam of the Jiang family and Xiao Jing." Xiao Wanru was stopped and helped out with her weak body. Before she went far, she met Zhao Shiran. Seeing Xiao Wanru's situation, he was shocked and hurried forward, but was avoided by Qing and Yujia. After that, no matter how Zhao Shiran tried to persuade her to stay, the two maids tried their best to help Xiao Wanru walk out. Since their master was unwilling to stay, they would definitely protect her and leave. Coincidentally, when they arrived at the place where the carriage was parked, a carriage came in and Nanny Yu got out of the carriage. Seeing Xiao Wanru and Zhao Shiran, Nanny Yu was stunned for a moment and hurriedly stepped forward to salute. "Greetings, Princess Qin. Our princess is not feeling well and has to go back first," Yujia replied bluntly. Xiao Wanru leaned against Qing with her eyes half closed, and most of her body was carried forward by Qing and Yujia. "Isn't Princess Qin here to pick up old madam?" Nanny Yu was stunned for a moment and asked in surprise. She really thought that the mansion had learned the news that old madam suddenly came back first, so Princess Chen and first grandma came out to pick her up one after another. "Our princess is not in good health, so she has to go back now. She will come back next time when she is better," Yujia said coldly. She and Qing were about to take Xiao Wanru to the carriage of Prince Chen's mansion. The curtain of the carriage, which had just arrived, was suddenly pulled open, revealing old madam's gloomy face. "Fifth miss, since you are here, you have to go back after lunch. Otherwise, how will others think of our mansion?" Hearing Nanny Yu say that Xiao Wanru was outside, old madam was delighted. She had wanted to put on airs, but she didn't expect that Xiao Wanru was going to leave. Old madam was in a bad mood at once. "Princess Qin, grandma is back. You can leave after lunch." Zhao Shiran, who had chased after old madam all the way, immediately agreed with her when he saw old madam. She still didn't know what had happened. Why did Princess Qin look so bad after she went to the third branch? She leaned on the servant girls listlessly and was almost half supported and half carried by the two servant girls. She was taken out by the two servant girls. "Thank you, old madam, but our princess is not feeling well and has to go back first." Yujia bowed to old madam's carriage and said, "How dare a servant girl interrupt? Slap her." Being refused by a servant girl, old madam was so angry that she patted the carriage pole beside her hard and said. The two rough old maids beside her carriage looked at each other hesitantly and came over cautiously. It seemed that they were going to reach out to Yujia. "Hurry up. She is just a cheap servant girl. As a grandmother, can't I teach my granddaughter's servant girl a lesson?" Seeing the two old maids cowering, old madam was particularly angry. Not to mention the two servant girls, even if she wanted to slap Xiao Wanru, no one would say anything about it. Xiao Wanru suddenly opened her eyes and said word by word, "Whoever dares to touch the servant girl of Prince Chen's mansion will be cut off." Chapter 1141. Remember in 1 second, 800 $say. Net Xiao Wanru opened her eyes at some point and looked at old madam coldly without dodging. Xiao Wanru opened her eyes at some point and looked at old madam with cold eyes without avoiding her gaze. Her face was pale without a trace of blood, but her lips were so red that they seemed to be bloodthirsty. There was a strange sense of incongruity. Old madam saw a bit of gloominess on her delicate and beautiful little face and couldn't help but panic. But she immediately flew into a rage. She was Xiao Wanru's biological grandmother and her elder. How dare she stare at her like this and talk to her like this? The two rough old maids had already stopped and stayed aside, for fear that Princess Chen would punish them. Today was different from the past. The servants of Marquis Xing's mansion all understood this. Of course, they didn't dare to rush to Xiao Wanru and act arrogantly. The person in front of them was Princess Chen, not just fifth Miss Xiao. "Xiao Wanru, how can you talk to grandma like this?" Old madam said angrily. She got out of the carriage with the help of a servant girl beside her and shouted, "What do you want me to say to you, old madam?" Xiao Wanru said firmly, "You're rebellious, unfilial thing. Even if I lose face today, I will expose your disobedience and unfilial things. The royal family will not want a daughter-in-law like you anymore." Old madam scolded loudly. In fact, she didn't want to fall out with Xiao Wanru. The current Princess Chen was not the former Princess Chen. It was said that Prince Chen was very likely to be appointed as the crown prince of the Eastern Palace, and Princess Chen might be the future mother of the country. However, she had to suppress Xiao Wanru at the moment. Otherwise, she couldn't let her seek benefits for Marquis Xing's mansion. Old madam was still having such a sweet dream at this moment. If old madam thinks that I am disobedient and unfilial, you can ask the Empress Dowager to make a decision. Xiao Wanru said sharply, "If the Empress Dowager thinks that I am indeed disobedient and unfilial, she will judge me. If the Empress Dowager thinks that I am right, she will definitely make a decision for me. Oh madam, please." Xiao Wanru moved her hand forward and looked at old madam with cold eyes. "Good, you actually used the Empress Dowager to suppress me. You only dare to do such a thing when your wings have grown strong. If I had known that you were unfilial in your bones, just like your mother, I wouldn't have allowed your father to marry your mother. Sure enough, she is unfilial and unlucky. Even her daughter is so unfilial and unlucky." Old madam was so angry that her eyes were on fire, and she spoke without thinking. She had always had the final say in Marquis Xing's mansion, and she had never been contradicted like this. She had come back with a good idea, so she deliberately came back earlier to discuss with her son how to maximize the benefits of Marquis Xing's mansion and how to make better use of Xiao Wanru. Unexpectedly, he met Xiao Wanru as soon as he returned to the mansion. Originally, he thought it was a good thing, but he didn't expect things to take a turn for the worse. Complain to the Empress Dowager? How could she dare? She had been punished by the Empress Dowager before. Now that she had just returned to the mansion, she caused trouble again. The Empress Dowager must be very angry. "My mother is unfilial. Old madam, do you dare to shout at the door?" Xiao Wanru said sternly, You are unfilial. Even if you gave birth to an ungrateful wretch, he is still better than you." But old madam was so angry that she staggered and fell to the ground. She rolled her eyes and fainted. Zhao Shiran and Nanny Yu ran over anxiously. One pinched the middle of her throat, and the other shouted on the side. It took them a lot of effort to wake her up. She came back. Xiao Wanru looked on coldly. She didn't leave, but she didn't go forward either. Old madam fainted in time just now. It was too coincidental. Even if she didn't get close, she could see that although her eyes were closed, her eyelids moved from time to time. It was obvious that she was awake. "Princess Chen, no matter what old madam did, she is still your elder and the biological mother of the heir of Duke of Xing. Can you really watch her faint out of anger? If this gets out, it will be bad for your reputation." Seeing that old madam finally woke up, Nanny Yu took a few steps forward to persuade her. When old madam woke up, she burst into tears regardless of her dignity. While crying, she said, "My poor son." She was talking about how she had raised Xiao Wanru's father and cried bitterly. Faint out of anger? Who saw it? Xiao Wanru said coldly with sarcasm in her eyes. She watched old madam put on a show. Old madam of Marquis Xing's mansion, who was originally superior, sat on the ground like a shrew, crying and shouting. "Your Highness, let's go back to the mansion. It has nothing to do with us whether old madam fainted or not. We didn't see old madam on the way here just now, so we happened to miss her." Yujia lied with her eyes open, as if she was really not afraid of Marquis Xing's mansion making trouble. "Your Highness, don't be angry. No matter how long some people live, their lives are in vain. They look noble, but in fact they are worthless." Qing also agreed and squinted at old madam. In fact, she wanted to fight more. Compared with talking, fighting was her strength. The prince had said that if anyone tried to harm the princess, she could go forward and fight. If anything happened, the prince would take responsibility. But now the princess did not order her to do it, so she could only wait. Old Madam's face turned livid and she almost fainted. Seeing Xiao Wanru walk around her to the carriage with her two maids after saying that, she could only gnash her teeth with hatred. Qinghua, the bitch, was really not a good person. Now she wished that Infanta Qinghua could appear in front of her and give her a few slaps to vent her anger. Go, stop her. Old Madam said with difficulty. She only felt dizzy and her hands and feet were cramping. Nanny Yu looked at Xiao Wanru and then at Old Madam. She took a few steps forward helplessly and caught up with Xiao Wanru. Princess Chen, please take a look at Old Madam. Old Madam is in a bad condition. Xiao Wanru ignored her and continued to walk forward. Nanny Yu was very anxious. She took a few steps forward and turned to the front of Xiao Wanru's carriage. She wanted to reach out to stop Xiao Wanru, but was pulled by Yu Jie. She spun out and held a tree beside her to stand firm. The two maids helped Xiao Wanru get into the carriage and the carriage left. Xiao Wanru. Old Madam's lips trembled and her face turned livid. She reached out to point at the back of the carriage, trembling and unable to say a word. Young madam, go and get a doctor? Nanny Yu knew at a glance that it was not good, so she rushed over and ordered Zhao Shiran loudly. Zhao Shiran frowned unhappily. No matter how favored Nanny Yu was, she was just a servant. How dare she order her? However, seeing that Old Madam was in a bad condition, she suppressed her anger and turned around to order someone around her to go to the third branch to get an imperial physician to take a look at Old Madam. She came here because she heard that Xiao Wanru had asked an imperial physician to treat third madam. Several people hurriedly carried Old Madam into the Chuntang courtyard. The imperial physician had been waiting there. After feeling Old Madam's pulse, he asked someone to take out a set of needles and gave Old Madam acupuncture. Only then did Old Madam's condition improve. Zhao Shiran accompanied the imperial physician to the side room to get a prescription. After the prescription was made, the imperial physician said, Old Madam of your mansion has shown signs of a stroke. If she doesn't take good care of it, she will easily have a stroke. This time, I happen to be here. If I had been a little slower, she would have been in trouble. Just now, Old Madam and fifth sister had some disputes. It won't happen again. Zhao Shiran frowned tightly and said helplessly, Imperial physician, can you... Young madam, I still have something to do in the Imperial Palace, so I can't stay here. Just take the medicine according to this prescription and take good care of it. It's easy for old people to have a stroke. In fact, it has nothing to do with others. It may be that Old Madam of your mansion didn't eat enough before and didn't exercise much. As she is old, everything is not good. The imperial physician shook his head, interrupted Zhao Shiran's words, and handed over the prescription. Zhao Shiran carried the medicine box, shook his head, and turned to leave. He didn't want to know what happened in Marquis Xing's mansion, and he was even more unwilling to get involved in it. What happened to Princess Qin had nothing to do with him. He was an imperial physician, not an official of the Ministry of Justice, so he didn't want to figure out the whole story. Obviously, Old Madam of Marquis Xing's mansion was not easy to deal with. He had also heard in the Imperial Palace that this Old Madam was not kind and it was not a big deal for her to quarrel with Princess Qin. It was said that this Old Madam did not treat Princess Qin as her granddaughter at all. As for the young Madam of Marquis Xing's mansion, she was obviously a smart person, but there were smart people in the Imperial Palace. No matter how honest the imperial physician was, he would not testify for what happened in Marquis Xing's mansion. Did Princess Chen make Old Madam of Marquis Xing's mansion so angry that she almost had a stroke? It would not do him any good to say this. Prince Chen was the last person to be trifled with. Seeing the imperial physician leave as if he was fleeing, Zhao Shiran's face darkened with the prescription in his hand. The imperial physician was so arrogant. He had thought that he could take advantage of Xiao Wanru. Young madam, Qiu Yu, her maid, came over and said in a low voice. Zhao Shiran lowered his head and looked at the prescription in his hand. He raised the corner of his mouth silently, walked to the window, picked up the writing brush used by the imperial physician just now, thought for a while, and added another medicine on it. After adding the medicine, he looked at it carefully and found that the handwriting was the same. A trace of sadness silently flashed across his eyes. It was good that the old woman could not get up. Of course, it was not good for her to die. She still needed to deal with the affairs of her father-in-law's mistress. It was good for her to lie in bed and recuperate. Go and get the medicine according to this prescription. Zhao Shiran waved the prescription in his hand and said. Qiu Yu nodded knowingly and went out to find Nanny Yu with the prescription. She had better not take over the task of getting the medicine. If something really happened, she would not be able to get rid of it. Only a few people around Zhao Shiran knew that she was proficient in medical skills. Nanny Yu took the prescription, looked at it for a while, and immediately sent someone to the pharmacy to get the medicine. While they were busy, Xiao Jing heard the news and hurried to Chuntang courtyard. Greetings, father. Zhao Shiran, who had just come out of the wing room, stepped forward and saluted Xiao Jing when he saw him. Xiao Jing waved his hand impatiently and went straight into the middle room. After Nanny Yu led him in, she retreated to the door. Seeing Zhao Shiran standing at the door of the wing room, she smiled uneasily and explained in a low voice, Old Madam is not feeling well, so she doesn't want too many people to follow her. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.